Good evening and welcome to the October 17, 2022 Zoning Hearing Master Meeting. I'm Pamela Jo Hatley and I'll be the Zoning Hearing Master this evening. Before we get started, if you'll please stand if you're able for the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, thank you. Again, I'm Pamela Jo Hatley and I'll be serving as the Zoning Hearing Master this evening. If you have any noise-making devices, any cell phones or other items, would you please silence those at this time? And then I would like to introduce Mr. Brian Grady of the Development Services Department. Mr. Grady will introduce staff and also any agenda changes, withdrawals, and continuances.
Good evening, Madam Hearing Officer. For the record, Brian Grady, Hillsborough County Development Services. Before I go through the changes to the agenda and publish withdrawals and continuances, I'll introduce other staff joining us tonight virtually. From Development Services, there's Tim Lampkin, Tanya Chapella, Michelle Heinrich, Chris Granell-Lenard, and Isis Brown. From our Transportation Review staff, Alex Steady, James Ratliff, and Richard Perez. From the Planning Commission, Carla Lanos, and from the County Attorney's Office, Mary Dorman. We do have 4 changes to the published agenda. The first change is on page 9 of the agenda, item D2, rezoning PD 92-0943. Staff is requesting a continuance of this item to the November 14th, 2022 zoning hearing master hearing. Madam Hearing Officer, the reasons for the continuance is some late filed issues and concerns raised by transportation staff that require some additional review, and therefore staff's requesting continuance to allow for that additional review to occur.
All right. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak on item, this is rezoning PD 22-0943. Anyone in the audience or online who wishes to speak to the continuance of this item? All right, I don't hear anyone. So rezoning PD 22-0943 is continued to the November 14th, 2022 zoning hearing master meeting.
The next change on the agenda is on page 9, item D3, rezoning PD 22-0949. The Adams Grace Contracting and Development LLC. Staff is requesting continuance to this item to the November 14th, 2022 zoning hearing master hearing. Madam Hearing Officer, reasons for the continuance: it was brought to our attention that from a resident that the sign on the property had fallen down. In discussions with the applicant was agreeable to continuance out of caution, just to avoid any potential due process concerns or issues with that. Again, it was not necessarily out of order for that issue, but again, the applicant was amenable to continuing given their concerns raised by residents regarding having proper notice for the applicant of the hearing date since the sign had fallen down. So staff is requesting continuance to November 14th, 2022 for this item.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone here in the audience or online who wishes to speak to rezoning PD 22-0949? All right, I don't hear anyone. All right, rezoning PD 22-0949 is continued to the November 14th, 2022 zoning hearing master meeting.
The next change is on page 5 of the agenda, item A16, rezoning standard 22-1027. This was shown as a continuance, but it's now being withdrawn from the zoning hearing master process. So again, that's item on page 5, item A16, rezoning standard 22-1027. It's being withdrawn from the zoning hearing master process. And then the final change is on page 9 of the agenda, item D5, major mod application 22-1112. The applicant's Landside Investment LLC. Staff is requesting the continuance of this item to the November 14th, 2022 zoning hearing master hearing. Madam Hearing Officer, similar to the first item, there was some late identified transportation issues, concerns that could not be adequately responded to without the need for the continuance. So in order to provide for more time for that review and response to those issues, staff is requesting this item be continued to the November 14th, 2022 zoning hearing master hearing.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone here in the audience or online who wishes to speak to the continuance of major modification 22-1112? All right, don't hear anyone. So major modification 22-1112 is continued to the November 14th, 2022 zoning hearing master meeting.
That concludes changes to the agenda. I'll now go through the published withdrawals and continuances beginning on page 4 of the agenda. The first item is item A1, rezoning PD 22-0567. This application is out of order to be heard and is being continued to the November 14th, 2022 zoning hearing master hearing. Item A2, rezoning PD 22-0648. This application is being continued by the applicant to the November 14th, 2022 zoning hearing master hearing. Item A3, major mod application 22-0671. This application is out of order to be heard and is being continued to the November 14th, 2022 zoning hearing master hearing. Item A4, major mod application 22-0686. This application is out of order to be heard and is being continued to the November 14th, 2022 zoning hearing master hearing. Item A5, rezoning PD 22-0696. This application is out of order to be heard and is being continued to the November 14th, 2022 zoning hearing master hearing. Item A6, rezoning PD 22-0719. This application is out of order to be heard and is being continued to the November 14th, 2022 zoning hearing master hearing. Item A7, rezoning PD 22-0856. This application is out of order to be heard and is being continued to the December 12th, 2022 zoning hearing master hearing. Item A8, rezoning PD 22-0857. This application is being continued by the applicant to the November 14th, 2022 zoning hearing master hearing. Item A9, major mod application 22-0860. This application is being continued by the applicant to the November 14th, 2022 zoning hearing master hearing. Item A10, rezoning PD 22-0865. This application is being continued by the applicant to the November 14th, 2022 zoning hearing master hearing. Item A11, major mod application 22-0867. This application out of order to be heard and is being continued to the November 14th, 2022 zoning hearing master hearing. Item A12, rezoning PD 22-0877. This application is being continued by the applicant to the November 14th, 2022 zoning hearing master hearing. Item A12, rezoning PD 22-0877. This application will be continued by the applicant to the November 14, 2022 zoning hearing master hearing. Item A13, major mod application 22-0884. This application is out of order to be heard and is being continued to the November 14, 2022 zoning hearing master hearing. Item A14, rezoning standard 22-0945. This application is out of order to be heard and is being continued to the November 14, 2022 zoning hearing master hearing. Item A15, rezoning PD 22-0948. This application has been continued by the applicant to the November 14, 2022 zoning hearing master hearing. As noted in the changes, the agenda item A16, rezoning standard 22-1027 has been withdrawn. Item A17, rezoning PD 22-1082. This application is out of order to be heard and is being continued to the November 14, 2022 zoning hearing master hearing. Item A18, major mod application 22-1096. This application is being continued by staff to the November 14, 2022 zoning hearing master hearing. Item A19, rezoning PD 22-1103. This application is being continued by staff to the November 14, 2022 zoning hearing master hearing. Item A20, rezoning PD 22-1107. This application is being continued by the applicant to the November 14, 2022 zoning hearing master hearing. Item A21, rezoning standard 22-1217. This application is being withdrawn from the zoning hearing master process. Item A22, rezoning standard 22-1221. This application is out of order to be heard and is being continued to the December 12th, 2022 zoning hearing master hearing. Item A23, major mod application 22-1116. This application is being continued by the applicant to the November 14, 2022 zoning hearing master hearing. Item A24, major mod application 22-1120. This application is being continued by the applicant to the November 14, 2022 zoning hearing master hearing. Item A25, major mod application 22-1126. This application is being continued by the applicant to the December 12th, 2022 zoning hearing master hearing. Item A26, rezoning PD 22-1195. This application is being continued by the applicant to the November 14, 2022 zoning hearing master hearing. Item A27, rezoning PD 22-1204. This application is being continued by the applicant to the November 14, 2022 zoning hearing master hearing. Item A28, special use general 22-1222. This application is out of order to be heard and is being continued to the November 14, 2022 zoning hearing master hearing. Item A29, rezoning PD 22-1223. This application is being continued by the applicant to the November 14, 2022 zoning hearing master hearing. Item A30, rezoning PD 22-1224. This application has been continued by the applicant to the November 14, 2022 zoning hearing master hearing. Item A31, rezoning PD 22-1225. This application is out of order to be heard and is being continued to the November 14, 2022 zoning hearing master hearing. Item A32, rezoning PD 22-1226. This application is being continued by the applicant to the November 14, 2022 zoning hearing master hearing. Item A33, major mod application 22-1228. This application has been continued by the applicant to the November 14, 2022 zoning hearing master hearing. Item A34, rezoning PD 22-1229. This application has been continued by the applicant to the November 14, 2022 zoning hearing master hearing. Item A35, major mod application 22-1307. Major mod 22-1301. This application has been continued by the applicant to the November 14, 2022 zoning hearing master hearing. Item A36, rezoning standard 22-1303. This application is out of order to be heard and has been continued to the November 14, 2022 zoning hearing master hearing. And item A37, major mod application 22-1392. This application has been continued by the applicant to the November 14, 2022 zoning hearing master hearing. That concludes all withdrawals and continuances.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Grady. All right, the agenda tonight consists of items that require a public hearing by a hearing master before going to the Board of County Commissioners for a final decision. I will conduct a hearing on each item today and will submit a written recommendation. My written recommendation will be filed with the clerk of the board within 15 working days after the conclusion of today's public hearings. The Board of County Commissioners will consider the record of today's public hearing and my recommendation and will make the final decision on the applications at a publicly noticed meeting on a date and time set by the Board of County Commissioners. The hearings today will be informal. I will ask questions related to the scope of direct testimony and may call and question witnesses as I deem appropriate. I will decide all questions of procedure. I will take evidence, but will exclude evidence that is irrelevant, immaterial, or unduly repetitious. Evidence may be presented in written form, and all testimony shall be under oath. Hearsay evidence may be used to supplement or explain other evidence, but shall not be sufficient alone to support a finding of fact unless it would be admissible over objections in a civil court action. The order of presentation will be as follows. First, county staff will introduce each item. The applicant and the applicant's witnesses will have 15 minutes to present the proposal. County Development Services will have 5 minutes to present its findings and recommendations. The Planning Commission will have 5 minutes to present its findings of compliance or non-compliance with the comprehensive plan. Proponents will have 15 minutes to present arguments in support of the proposal. Opponents will have 15 minutes to present arguments against the proposal. County staff will have 5 minutes to present any amended recommendations, and the applicant will have 5 minutes for rebuttal and summation. The 15 minutes that are allotted to proponents and opponents is the total time. So if there are a number of persons who wish to speak, the 15 minutes will be distributed among you. If you have a spokesperson you wish to designate for a number of persons, you may do that as well. When you come to the microphone to speak, please first state your name and address for the record. The meeting is being recorded, so please use the microphone so your testimony can be heard and recorded. When you're finished, please see the clerk to my right to sign in for the record. And now we'll hear from the County Attorney's Office, who will state the legal requirements for requesting oral argument at the public meeting, where the Board of County Commissioners will make a final decision on each item.
This is Mary Dorman from the County Attorney's Office. Tonight's public hearing is the first step of a two-step rezoning process. This hearing is the time for rezoning applicants and interested parties to present testimony and evidence. Any evidence presented tonight will become the complete factual record of each application, and no additional evidence can be introduced after the closing of each application. The second step of the rezoning process is a public meeting before the Board of County Commissioners, where the board will make a decision on each application heard tonight. Tonight's applications are scheduled to be heard by the board at its December 13th, 2022 land use meeting. When considering applications, the board will only review the record created at tonight's hearing and the recommendation made by the hearing master for each application. The hearing officer will file a recommendation for each application heard tonight on November 7th, 2022. The Board of County Commissioners has established a policy that directs which rezoning and major modification applications are to be placed on the consent agenda of the board's land use meeting. Applications that propose to add density outside the urban service area, applications that are on roadways with a failing level of service, and applications that have had evidence or testimony provided to the record by non-applicant parties of record either prior to or at the public hearing tonight are not qualified for placement on the consent agenda. Applications which do not have consistent recommendations of approval or denial are also not qualified to be placed on the consent agenda. The board shall allow public testimony by parties of record at its meeting to consider the land use hearing officer's recommendation for any item on the regular agenda. Any public testimony shall be limited to the record of the proceedings before the land use hearing officer unless additional evidence has been found admissible in accordance with Section 10.03.04D of the Land Development Code. A party of record is an individual who fits into at least one of the following four categories. First, an individual who is present tonight and presents testimony or documentary evidence. Second, an individual certified by the U.S. Postal Service as having been mailed notice of tonight's hearing. Third, an individual who submitted documentary evidence to the master file at least 2 business days prior to tonight's hearing. Or fourth, an individual who submitted documentary evidence by proxy at tonight's hearing. Again, the content of oral argument before the board shall be limited to the content of the testimony and other evidence submitted verbally or in writing to the hearing officer tonight. It is the role of the county attorney's office to ensure that only individuals who have met these requirements are allowed to speak before the board and to ensure that no new evidence or testimony is introduced or allowed at the board's public meeting. For these reasons, please make sure that all information you wish the board to consider at its public meeting is entered into tonight's record.
All right, thank you. As I said, the testimony tonight must be under oath, so if you intend to present testimony this evening, please stand as you're able and raise your right hand to be sworn in. And anyone online who is going to testify as well, thank you. Do you swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Grady, we're ready for the first case.
The first item is agenda item B1, major mod application 22-0689. The applicant is Falcon and Associates LLC. The request is for a major modification to existing plan development. Madam Hearing Officer, this was remanded by the Board of County Commissioners for further evaluation of a number of issues. Michelle Heinrich with county staff will provide staff recommendation after presentation by the applicant. I will advise that this is related to a comprehensive plan amendment, and per direction of the board, this will be heard concurrently with the comprehensive plan amendment at the December 15th BOCC public hearing on this item. Therefore, this item will be heard concurrently with that item on December 15th at 6 p.m. Your recommendation deadline doesn't change, but I did want to note for the record again that this will be heard at the December 15th public hearing at 6 p.m. as a related item to the comprehensive plan amendment that's related to this major modification. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Grady. We'll hear from the applicant then. Applicant.
Good evening, Elise Batzel with Stearns Weaver Miller, 401 East Jackson Street. May I share my screen, Madam Hearing Officer?
Yes, please, thank you.
Thank you. Please let me know when you can see that.
I can see it.
Great. We are here tonight either virtually or in person with all of the team members, including our civil engineers and our traffic engineers tonight. Really quickly, this remand was real specific. The first thing the board requested was that staff evaluate whether access along Miller Road could be changed to emergency access only. We'll talk about that. And then the board requested that we present first a line of sight diagram, and second, to address screening for the zoning hearing master to evaluate compatibility. This property, just as a quick refresh, Madam Hearing Officer, is generally located on the southwest corner of State Road 60 and Miller 1, and it is about 18.48 acres in Valrico. So the first point that the board wanted us to discuss, if you recall, we had proposed a full access point on Miller Road. Staff actually required a full access as part of our site plan review. The applicant did resubmit a site plan, and staff is now supporting the updated site plan with emergency access only to Miller Road. There is a pedestrian connection with Miller Road as well. This updated access was coordinated with FDOT, and Steve Henry with Links and Associates is here if you need any additional information on that FDOT coordination. Here you can see the site plan with the revised access. You can see circled in red or squared in red that we have identified that this will be emergency vehicular access only, changed from full access. So with the second issue, it's really an issue of compatibility. So at this period in time, I would like to introduce David Smith with over 35 years of planning experience, who was formerly with Hillsborough County and now with Stearns Weaver Miller, to talk about the line of sight and buffering compatibility issues.
Good evening. So just to go back slightly,
Can you please state your name for the record?
I'm sorry, David Smith, Director of Development and Zoning for Stearns Weaver Miller. As Lisa mentioned, this was remanded. You have looked at this site for compatibility and adequacy of buffers and setback, but the Board of County Commissioners wanted you to take a fresh look again within the context of the sight lines that we'll be presenting to you, and to just reconfirm or reevaluate the compatibility that is furthered by the proposed setbacks buffering of the project. This will give you a general context of how the site has been laid out right now. The proposed development proposes buildings that are 180 to 510 feet from the single-family homes on all sides of the property. On the northwest corner, there are two single-family homes. You see they're 310 and 455 feet away from the nearest apartment building, four-story building in that location. On the southwest corner, 400 feet to the nearest residential front to the apartment building, which I'll note now and then again later in the record. That building, in response to commissioners' concerns about height and the relationship to these single-family homes, that building has been reduced to 3 stories. It is no longer a 4-story building. Also going around on the south side, another residential 350 feet, another one to the southeast, 510 feet, just walking right around the side along the east side, 415, 445, and the closest one is in the northeast corner, and that's 180 feet from the nearest apartment building. Also should note that those 2 apartment buildings were previously 4-story and have been reduced to 3-story in the site plan that was filed for this hearing.
Mr. Smith, I don't see the one that's 180 feet. Can you go back to that slide, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's north-south in the upper right-hand corner. Right.
I see it now. Thank you.
It gets kind of obscured by the colors there in the shading.
Okay.
So as I kind of alluded to, the site plan now consists of four-story buildings, which are internal to the site at 58 foot in height. The three-story buildings are now shown on the plan at 45 feet in height. Again, those three-story buildings are the ones most proximate to single-family homes, and therefore the applicant has reduced those heights, even though the previous heights have been found compatible and consistent given the setbacks and buffering that was proposed. So this is the line of sight graphics that have been prepared for this, just to give a perspective. So again, this is a party that would be the home that's on Miller Road, looking north from their property. They would be looking through a proposed buffer, which is a 20B buffer, into the site, and from their house to the development, and in particular, the highest point of the building, there'd be 180 feet of separation. We've noted on here that there's a 96-foot minimum setback from the property boundary. We've also inserted in here, just for reference purposes, the height allowed by the currently approved commercial zoning that's on the site. So if the proposed project was not developed, the red shadow there shows that a 50-foot high commercial building meeting the 2-to-1 setback of the code would be at that location. You can see, given the fact that we have a 3-story building compared to what could be there at 50-foot high, that the current approvals are higher than those that were being proposed, and that there's significant setback and screening. In your staff report, you'll note that they've done a very good job of showing what has been approved, what is proposed, what would be required, and how we exceed the buffer and screening, as well as 2-to-1 setback.
Okay. I'm sorry, just one second. So if I understand this illustration correct, the existing approved commercial height is 50 feet. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And then that building that would be there would also be 50 feet high. Is that correct?
Building that's there is 3 stories, 45 feet.
Is 45, did you say?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so what this illustrates then, with the additional setback, I mean, the visibility is greatly reduced, or the line of sight is greatly reduced compared to the potential existing commercial building that could be at that location.
Yes, ma'am, exactly. And through the slides, a consistent theme, we'll show a red shadowed area for what is currently approved, just to give a perspective as to what is changing and how this proposed development is different in providing its setbacks.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. So we'll get to the next view is again coming from the same house, but looking due west. And in this particular case, where the house is located and to where you actually get to the apartment building that's proposed, you have 400-foot view triangle that goes to a 4-story building. So that would be 58 feet tall. What we've shown in here is that the currently approved plan on site approves a townhouse of 40 foot in height at a 40-foot setback. So it just gives you some rough proportionality, is that townhome is at 40 feet, pretty close to the property line, and we're at 110 feet back. So we're 70 foot further away, and we are only 18 feet taller to the peak of the roof. The screening provided on the side is a 20-foot B minimum, and that is where there's a garage located. I'll go through a little bit of explanation that we have on those boundaries. We have a 20-foot B and then a 32-foot buffer where there aren't these shorter garages. Going to the next view corridor, this view corridor is from the property south. In this particular case, we have 350-foot separation from the existing house to the proposed building. That is a 185-foot setback. Within that setback, we have a 50-foot buffer, as shown on this graphic.
Remember, this is the one that's 4-story versus 3.
Right. And this is one of the ones, we did not have time. We had a corrupted file for the architect. This building is now 3 stories.
Okay.
So this is 45-foot tall building. It has 350-foot view triangle. And here's the 40-foot townhome where it would be permitted, or where it is permitted under the current approval. So you can see we're only going to be 5 foot taller, but we are, let's see, 40 from 185, 145 feet further set back with a 50-foot buffer. The next view, while it doesn't match up exactly with our setbacks, this house is the next furthest to the east. It has a 510-foot view corridor. Townhomes are allowed to be on that corner in this graphic at 40 feet at a 40-foot buffer. The corner of this is 3-story building, so it's only 45 on this corner right here. And we have a 32-foot type B buffer. Now this one up here we've just provided for some reference. These are the homes along State Road 60. The minimum buffer is 110 feet. There is actually a greater effective buffer to this amenity building. And these apartment buildings are actually much further back. In fact, when I look at the information that I discussed earlier, those buildings are, that first one is 310 feet from the closest apartment building. So it's 310 feet from here to this property person at their house. It's 280-foot view triangle to the amenity building. The minimum buffer, minimum setback on that side for the apartment buildings is 110 feet, but we're considerably further back from those properties. Similarly, this is the single-family home that is even further west of the property. It's 454 feet away. It's, according to the graphics, 455 feet on the diagonal to the closest apartment building. And in here you see that there's a 50-foot tall commercial building that would be allowed there, and that would be its location based upon the 2-to-1 setback that would be applicable to that property. And so we have a 186-foot effective setback. Again, the minimum is 110, but to the amenity building, that's an effective setback. So now to go with the buffers, adequate screening. We've already determined that the screening that provided was adequate, but I think it's just good to go around here and point out a few things. One, on the boundary right here, the required setback is 70 feet and a 20B is required. We're at 96 feet and a 20B is provided. Along the eastern facing property boundary, required is 96 feet with a 20B. We propose a 110 setback with a 20B and a 32B. And again, the 32B is where there aren't garages, a 20B where there are garages. By the way, the garages are only 15 foot tall. And then on the southern part, we have a proposed 185-foot setback and a 50B where only a 70-foot setback and a 20B is required. Along the eastern property boundary, again, we have the 110-foot setback where 96 would be required with 20B or 32B, depending if there's garages or not. There's no 2-to-1 setback required from the front, but if you look in the site plan, we have a 240-foot setback from State Road 60, and we have larger than that, 264-foot setback along State Road 60 with a 30-foot scenic corridor buffer. So, Madam Hearing Officer, the Development Service staff has recommended approval. Planning Commission staff has found the project consistent. You had previously found this project to be approvable, subject to conditions. The additional information that we have provided tonight, I would hope would supplement your consideration of the adequacies of the buffers and setbacks and sensitivity of the design on this project. This is in line with the county's vision for Brandon and will allow for much needed residential in an area with abundant commercial uses
on a future transit corridor.
With that, we'll reserve any time we have for rebuttal and be glad to answer any questions.
Just in general then, and the line of sight slides and your testimony went into great detail, and I appreciate that. I think it's very helpful. But just overall, is it your opinion that this proposed site plan compared to the existing approval, from a line of sight perspective, does it have less impacts on the residential properties, adjacent residential properties, or surrounding residential properties than the existing approval?
Yes, ma'am. My opinion would be that given the close proximity of the townhomes and also the height of the commercial at the setbacks that are approved in the current PD, that this plan is much more sensitive in the placement of buildings, the providing of setbacks that enhances compatibility, and in some cases may be slightly greater, but in most cases is substantially greater than that afforded to adjacent property owners by the when you compare it to the approved plan.
So in general, then, the improvements to the line of sight context really are related to the additional setback that this site plan includes compared to the existing approval?
Yeah, the existing, the additional setback that's provided in this particular approval as compared to the already approved site plan, but also we have, in certain cases, we have exceeded the buffer requirement in width on most of the property boundaries where there are residential homes. So I think it's a combination of the both.
All right, thank you. That's all the questions I have for you.
Thank you very much.
All right. All right, so we'll move on then to the County Development Services.
Hi, good evening. This is Michelle Heinrich, Development Services. To briefly refamiliarize yourself with this application, this is a modification to PD 060464, which is currently approved for 75,000 square feet of CG uses and 86 townhomes. The modification requests to utilize the entire site for a multifamily project consisting of 312 units. As a companion to this major mod, the applicant is requesting a comp plan amendment from the Res 4 and Res 9 future land use categories on the site to the Res 20 future land use category. As you heard, this application was remanded back to the zoning hearing master by the board at their August CPA meeting to review the removal of the Miller Road access and general compatibility. The applicant did submit a revised site plan, which did provide 8 changes. Firstly, to replace the previously approved full access point on Miller Road to an emergency only access point with pedestrian connection. Reduced the building height for the 2 northeastern corner buildings from 4 stories to 3 stories, which is a reduction from 58 feet to 45 feet. Remove the specific parking counts, given that the bedroom per unit calculations have not yet been finalized. Updated the 10-foot wide multi-use trail along Miller Road for accuracy. Reduced the building height for the southernmost building from 4 stories to 3 stories, and again, this is a reduction from 58 feet to 45 feet. Revised the State Road 60 access from a right-in, right-out, left-in access point to a full access point. Provided a turnaround area along the eastern PD boundary of the site plan. And graphically moved the northeasternmost building closer to the eastern PD boundary to align with the previously noted 40-foot setback. Staff's review of the revised proposal finds that the project continues to be compatible with the adjacent residential uses. The project is located on State Road 60, a principal arterial roadway, which is developed with the area's commercial, office, and other multifamily uses. Access is now proposed to occur only on State Road 60. The project utilizes site planning techniques such as greater setbacks, building height maximums, and buffering and screening to avoid impact on adjacent properties. As you heard from the applicant's team, all building setbacks exceed the 2-to-1 setback requirement along all PD boundaries, and buffering and screening is provided along the western, eastern, and southern PD boundaries that meet or exceed code minimums. The revised proposal has been found to be consistent with the comprehensive plan and received no objections from reviewing agencies. These factors, along with Development Services review, has resulted in a recommendation of approval subject to proposed conditions. And I'm available for any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Heinrich. And I have a question, and probably I should have asked the applicant, but they could address this at rebuttal. So I'll ask you as well. The emergency access, what exactly does that look like? There is an actual access there, but is it gated or something closed so that residents of the apartments can't use it? And how is it activated? If there were an emergency, how would it be activated or opened?
Based on my experience, I believe those are always gated. We do have transportation staff available, and they would probably be able to provide you with more accurate answers.
That would be helpful. I'd like to know if there are, the county has required standards for them that this is going to have to meet, that sort of thing.
Correct. I believe Richard Perez is available to answer that question.
Yes, Madam Zoning Hearing Master, Richard Perez, Transportation Review Section for the record. An emergency access would be required to be gated and have what's known as a Knox box access that is accessible to our EMS services in the event of an emergency.
All right, so it's not something that residents could, make a habit of using at all, huh?
That is correct. It would not be allowed for regular access by the residents for any other purposes other than emergency access.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Perez.
Madam Hearing Officer, we do have one correct typo in condition 13B. It says regarding site access improvements on State Road 60. Says 13B says a westbound right turn lane approaching the project entrance. That should be an eastbound right turn lane approaching the project entrance.
Okay, so condition B typo should be eastbound, not westbound.
Correct.
All right, thank you. All right, we'll hear from Planning Commission then.
Carliano, Senior Planner with Commission staff. Madam Zoning.
All right, we can't hear you.
You can't hear me?
Now I can hear you a little better.
Okay, maybe I have to. Okay. Carliano, Senior Planner with Planning Commission staff. Madam Hearing Officer, I have 2 items to correct on the Planning Commission staff report for the record. The first item is on page 2 of the staff report. It was stated that the applicant requested a remand to September 19, 2022 zoning hearing master meeting. This remand was actually at the request of the Board of County Commissioners, as you heard Development Service state. The second item is on page 8 of the staff report. The first bullet point states reduced building height along the south property line from 4 feet to 3 feet. That's a typical graphical error, and the word height, and the word feet should actually be stories, not feet. That's a really small building. So I'll continue on with my testimony here. The subject property is 18.4 acres in size, located in the southwest quadrant of State Route 60 and Miller Road. The site consists of 4 parcels with access to State Route 60, a principal arterial, and Miller Road, a county collector roadway. The property is within the urban service area and is not within the limits of the community plan. The applicant is requesting a major modification to plan development 060464 and major modification 15-0538 to allow for a development of 312 multifamily apartment units. The rezoning application 220689 was heard at the June 13 zoning hearing master meeting. The associated CPA case 2127 and the rezoning major modification 220689 went before the BOCC on August 11, 2022. At the BOCC meeting, it was remanded to go before the on September 19, 2022 zoning hearing master. And then the applicant later continued it to the October, which is today, our hearing. The rezoning 22-0689 and the associated CPA 2127 is scheduled to go before the Board of County Commissioners for a final decision on December 15, 2022. Now, the property has a future land use designation of residential 9 and residential 4. However, the property is pending a plan amendment under HCCPA 2127 for a proposed future land use designation of residential 20, which will allow up to 20 dwelling units per gross acre or a non-residential floor area of 0.75. To the northwest is residential 6 future land use category, which allows residential density at up to 6 dwelling units an acre, and commercial uses at 0.25. Residential 20 flu is requested to the west of the subject site under HCCPA 2126. To the south, southeast, southwest, and east is residential 4 future land use category, which allows for dwelling units an acre or 0.25 FAR. Now, the surrounding area is characterized by public institutions, light industrial, light commercial, and single-family uses. The property has frontage on North State Road 60, which is a 4-lane roadway considered to be a transit corridor. To the west of the property is a drive-through restaurant, open storage, and vehicle rental. To the east is and southeast is the Winn-Dixie Shopping Plaza, a drive-through restaurant, and a barbershop. South and southeast are single-family detached homes. North, northwest, and northeast is a mobile home park community, Realtor's office, and a United States Postal Office. So Planning Commission staff has reviewed the proposed changes subject to the remand and finds the request consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the comprehensive plan. The request is consistent with policy 1.4 objective 6 and its accompanying policies of the future land use element, which refers to compatibility with the surrounding area. Residential development surrounding the site is mostly composed of quarter-acre lots, which would be equivalent to 4 dwelling units an acre. The nearby commercial is primarily retail-oriented and developed with a floor area ratio of 0.08 and 0.23. Given the overall development pattern in the immediate area, that apartment complex that's being proposed is consistent with the growth management strategies. The property does have access to urban services, which is consistent with Objective 1 and the accompanying policies of the future land use element. The request is consistent with Goal 1, Objective 1.3, Policy 1.3.5, and Policy 1.3.13 of the One Water element. None of the buildings are being proposed within the wellhead protection area. The proposed development is consistent with Objective 12.1 and the accompanying policies of the future land use element, as it creates a transition between the single family to the south, southwest, and west to the existing retail development located to the north, east, northeast, and southeast. Staff reviewed the zoning history of the property and noticed that the property was once approved for a PD with a maximum of 75,000 square feet of commercial general uses and 86 townhomes under PD 060464. The current request will increase the density, but it removes the commercial entitlements. The staff reviewed the most recent site plan dated September 27, 2022, and finds that it accomplishes a good design by concentrating, the buildings towards the middle of the site, creating a far enough setback to offset any potential negative impacts to the surrounding single-family residential. And furthermore, the site has internal and exterior pedestrian access, which would enable like a walkable development and access to public transportation as well as goods and services. Overall, this proposed major modification will allow for a development that is consistent with the unincorporated Hillsborough County Comprehensive Plan goals, objectives, and policies. Now, based upon those considerations, Planning Commission staff finds the proposed major modification is consistent with the unincorporated Hillsborough County Comprehensive Plan, subject to the conditions proposed by the Development Services Department. And I will stand if you have any questions.
All right, thank you. I don't have any questions for you. All right, we'll go to the public then. Is there anyone here in the audience or online who wishes to speak in support of this application? I do not hear anyone. Is there anyone here or online who wishes to speak in opposition to this application?
I do.
Okay, we have someone online. Please go ahead. State your name and address for the record, please.
My name's Elizabeth Rodriguez Belcher. I'm at 406 South Miller Road. I'm in opposition of this project because it is not consistent or compatible with any apartments or townhomes in our area. They're proposing three times and more the density that is currently rezoned. We have 7 developments in our area that are apartments and townhomes, and none of them exceed 3 stories. None of them have the density, the high density that this project has. There is nothing in this area that is zoned residential 20. It's all PDs and I'm sorry, I have to look at my notes. They're mostly PDs, and I do believe that we have an RMC 9. The townhomes that are to the south of or the north of State Road 60 on the Miller side are 2-story highs. Excuse me, the apartment complexes are 2-story highs. Need I mention too that residential, we're the max we can go high according to the Florida Building Code. R608.2 is 35 feet high. The reason I want this to be denied is, again, because of the height of the buildings and the story amount. We have Varico Station, which is a huge apartment complex. They don't exceed 3 stories. So I don't believe that this is consistent or compatible to our area. We do have a 5-story commercial building on Highway 60 that is commercial. And for all of its existence, it's been vacant. The developer is proposing to not have commercial, or comparing the existing zoning to the proposed. And if you look at their other site plans, the commercial is primarily in the front. So the height of 50 feet does not really affect any of our residential homes in the back. They were supposed to build 86 townhomes before. And again, this number has quadrupled if you look at that number. I don't know how much time I have. Could you please let me know? Anybody else wants to speak?
Ms. Belcher, the opposition has 15 minutes. You have right now just a little over 12 minutes left, and there may be people here who wish to speak.
Okay, I'm not there, so I do think that there's at least 2 people to speak. I just want to be okay on time, please.
All right. I believe there are at least 2 people here in the audience. Are you finished then?
I just want to bring up one point about the sidewalks on Miller. The sidewalks, and I have pictures, and I have submitted it by email to put on the record. Those sidewalks have been in despair for many, many years and are unusable for handicap, even pedestrians, because it's a hazard, they can trip. And also that the lighting on on Miller Road is not sufficient. There's no street lighting on Miller to light the sidewalks, to walk for pedestrians in this. And I believe I'm done. Thank you.
All right. And Ms. Belcher, just to be clear, as far as this proposal is concerned, this major modification is concerned, is it your testimony that your main concern is the height of the buildings?
My main concern is the height of the building, because they keep saying it's consistent and comparable, but all the apartment buildings that are in our area within a 1-mile radius are nowhere near 4 stories. They're all 3 stories and lower. And that's why I don't believe that this should be approved as is. If you're consistent, you need to be 3 stories or lower. And this is a primarily residential area, single family. We are restricted to only be the max 35 feet. So that's why I do not agree with the project. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Belcher. All right, is there anyone else who wishes to speak in opposition to this application? Please come forward if you're here, or if you're online, speak up.
Good evening. My name is Robert Padilla. I live at 212 Ronja Lane in Valrico. I'm the Bonterra HOA president that is going to be directly impacted by this project. I represent 90 homeowners, and I've heard from the majority of them that are not in favor, and they are wholeheartedly against this project being built for all the reasons that Ms. Belcher stated and the ones I'm going to lay out for you. We will be directly impacted by this proposed rezoning in an immensely negative manner. Between traffic for an overwhelmed roadway on State Road 60 and Miller, the excess amount of service staff, employees, and tenants living there coming and going 24/7 will put families at risk with the lack of any kind of infrastructure upgrades that are planned or being done currently. At least a third of the homeowners in my community have been involved with or witnessed an accident on Bonterra, especially at the intersection of Bonterra and Miller. My wife being one of them, she was hit by somebody on a because traffic was so backed up going northbound on Miller due to the lights at State Road 60. There was a child that was struck by a car at a bus stop at the corner of my intersection, also due to traffic. Increasing the density means increasing traffic and people taking alternate routes due to congestion, further putting school zones at risk, which include Valrico and Buckhorn. For vehicle accidents, as well as immensely congested and congesting the areas of Miller and Lumsden and Valrico. There are no multi-home sites within the compatibility area that are 3 stories high. Everything is 2 stories, even the Valrico Station apartment complex down the street. Compatibility also considers vehicular traffic, circulation, access, and parking impacts. Those also should be considered in this proposal. The applicant has not stated those numbers as of yet, and my understanding is are using an outdated traffic study from 2015 or around that time. Crossing State Road 60 at the proposed turning location is putting people at immense risk, especially since the county acknowledges it due to an unsafe turn waiver being granted. When was the most recent traffic study completed? I believe a more recent one should be completed in order to have a more accurate picture of what we're gonna be given.
Mr. Padilla?
Yes, ma'am.
Where did you get that information on the traffic study?
This was at the hearing in July. The proposed traffic study that was used was I want to say it was 2015. It coincided with the state's traffic study as well of State Road 60.
Okay, so you're not talking about a traffic study that was done for this project or the traffic?
Correct. The traffic study that they're using for this project, my understanding is it was done it's outdated,
Okay.
Essentially.
All right, the applicant can address that on their remand. Thank you for that. Go ahead, sir.
The emergency access, I can't say I believe anything that they say about emergency access only. I've seen plenty of apartments in Brandon area that have emergency access only, but they remain open to the general public. What ramifications, if any, can they be held to make sure that they hold their end of the bargain? I believe the zone master and the board of county commissioners should consider responsible development vice just allowing developers to develop whatever they want because it checks the box. Townhomes make homes for an area that are greatly needed in this area. I understand that, but apartment complexes in this area do not fit that criteria. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Padilla, just a question for you too.
Yes, ma'am.
And your concern is with Miller as I understand it from your testimony, is with Miller Road and specifically at Bonterra.
It's the general vicinity, basically the four corners, Valrico Road, State Road 60, Lumsden and Valrico, Miller and Lumsden, and then, I'm between State Road 60 and Lumsden. So there's four corners in this area that are going to be immensely impacted for traffic and safety.
Okay, but for this project, if there isn't an entrance on Miller Road, so it keeps the resident traffic out on 60, does that help address your concern?
No, ma'am, because these people who are going to live in these apartment complexes are going to be having kids in the area, between school choice, other schools areas. Valrico, Buckhorn are popular choices. Mulrennan is in the area. They're just going to turn down 60, and it's going to create a really bad traffic jam. Create opportunities where there's going to be immense accidents at my intersection specifically, but there's at least two intersections past my community that would be impacted as well.
All right. And I guess my last question, and please don't take this the wrong way, but do you have any expertise in transportation or traffic?
I do not, ma'am. As the president, I've communicated with several civil engineers, some who have worked on the State Road 60 widening project before it got canceled. Other civil engineers who are experts in the transportation, and they all agreed with that point of view that the infrastructure is inadequate as it is, and it would be immensely overwhelmed if it's allowed to continue. And based off the applicant's report, it lists Miller as being substandard as well.
Okay. And those engineers, none of them are here tonight to testify?
No, ma'am.
No, sir. Okay.
Actually, that's not true. I'm one of Rob's neighbors. I'm a civil engineer in the area.
All right, we'll hear from you next. Thank you, please.
Sure.
Is that all you have,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Padilla? Thank you so much. All right. Mr. Padilla, please sign in with the clerk. All right. And then did we have someone else here in the audience? Please come forward, sir.
Yes, ma'am. My name's Charles Bothy. I live at 2303 Highway 60. I've lived there for 40 years. My neighbor Don Byansky, his family's lived there for 70 years. Our properties are just to the west of this proposed development. We are in opposition to this because we feel that we have already agreed to the residential 9, which was going to allow 86 townhomes instead of 200-something townhomes. We just think that it's way too dense. In this project, there's also a project that is being proposed just to the east of me at Valrico Road and 60, and they want to have another 300 apartments. So what we're talking about going is from a couple hundred apartments on either, or townhomes on either side of us, to over 600 high-density apartments. We just feel that the residential 9 zoning that is already in place and that we already agreed to is sufficient, and it fits the character of our neighborhood. The other thing, which the other two talked about, was the traffic. Highway 60 coming out of Valrico, coming out of Brandon, is an 8-lane road. When it gets to Valrico Road, it goes to 6-lane. When it gets between my house and my neighbor's house, it goes to 4-lane. That is a classic bottleneck, and ma'am, I live there every day. It is a mess. You add another 600 apartments to that, and it's going to be even worse. And that's a main evacuation route too. So thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Be sure and sign in with the clerk's office. All right. Was there someone else who wished to speak? Someone online?
Yes. My name's Zach Sarver. I live at 216 Ronya Lane. I'm basically neighbors with Rob. He spoke earlier. Kind of piggybacking on him and the last speaker. There is a big bottleneck heading east from Valrico to Miller. It does go from 4 lanes to 3 lanes very briefly, down to 2 lanes once you hit Miller Road. That's the reason there is a DOT project that is It's already submitted phase 2 plan, 60% plans. It's FPID 435750-1. With the intent of expanding it to 3 lanes away from Valrico to Dover Road to really eliminate that bottleneck and get past all the communities out more towards the farmland once you don't need that capacity anymore. If you guys are familiar with this area, the low point of this area is at Miller Road. So one of basically the primary place in order to build a new road, to widen a new road, you need somewhere for the stormwater to go. That corner is one of the prime locations to put that stormwater. This has already started coordination with the developer, at least previously back in 2018. The project isn't funded for construction right now, so there hasn't been a big push on it the last few years. But if you build these apartments, you're basically just you're really putting DOT in a bind of what can they do in order to widen this road that really needs to be widened. And now you're adding more people living here, not with just this community, but other communities that people have talked about, along with all the other development that's going on in the area. So you're really just by expanding that capacity, the density of the amount of people living there, it's doing a harm to the overall area by precluding the State Road 60 from being able to be widened out towards the farmland once you get past where everybody needs to turn to get to their home. So it's kind of my spiel in a nutshell.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sarver. Did you say, did you speak up earlier while Mr. Padilla was testifying?
Yes, that was me.
Thank you. Did you say that you have expertise in transportation or in engineering or something?
Yes, I was actually the roadway engineer of record on that State Road 60 widening project at my previous firm. That's why I'm kind of in the know on it. I'm no longer at that firm, but yes, I'm a professional engineer, with a roadway background. So, yep.
Madam Hearing Officer, if I could cross-examine this witness, I would appreciate it.
All right. I guess we'll allow for that at this time. But Ms. Batzel, can you hold off just a second because I have a question or two?
No problem.
All right, thank you. Okay, Mr. Sarver, I guess the issues that were raised by Mr. Padilla really had to do with Miller Road and in his, I think it's Bonterra.
Yes.
Could you speak to that, please? Do you have an opinion as to whether this project with an entrance only on 60 could somehow impact that?
Really, so the big thing with only having an entrance on 60 is you are increasing the vehicles going on to State Road 60, and like the previous speaker said, at that point it's down to 4 lanes. You're really putting during rush hour traffic, you're putting additional cars into rush hour that's already totally backed up because of the bottleneck. So it's just adding extra density to this area. You're just kind of making the problem worse with only that entrance on State Road 60. But on the flip side, if you put one on Miller Road, that's a 2-lane road that's already like you said, going in school zones. It's already got a backed up light there. So really it's kind of in a bad situation no matter what you do.
Okay, Mr. Sarver, are you familiar with the approvals that exist on this parcel, the 86 townhomes and the retail?
I was familiar with that. We during the design when I was involved, we did look at old permits from Swift Mud. I remember that DOT did have a few meetings with the property owner when I was there. I wasn't involved in any of those meetings, so I don't really know what kind of happened but behind those closed doors. But I was mainly from the design side. So,
do you have any knowledge or any opinions on the traffic that would be generated by the existing approvals as compared to the requested approvals?
I mean, if you just think about the amount of vehicles that are coming out of it, it's 25-30% of the vehicles that would be coming out of what you're going from an 80 townhome area to a 300 apartment complex. So just kind of doing the math on there, that's how many extra vehicles you're adding to this situation.
No, there's also commercial retail in the existing approval.
Okay, I'm not sure how much that would generate. Again, I don't have the traffic data
Okay,
on hand. I'm more
that's
just
all
kind of
right.
going. Yeah,
That's
this
all
part is
right.
coming. Yeah,
If you
this
haven't looked,
part's.
that's
Yeah.
all right. If you haven't looked at it, that's okay. I just wanted to ask if you had.
Yeah. Yeah, this part's more coming from just a person who lives in the area and deals with the rush hour every day. So it's just kind of it's more of the visual thing every day.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Sarver, at this time, the counsel for the applicant wishes to cross-examine.
Sure, go for it.
You are under oath, is that correct?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
I just had one question, Mr. Sarver. For the record, Elise Batzel, Stearns Weaver Miller. You mentioned that you were a civil engineer, but then it sounded like you were trying to say that you were a transportation engineer. Can you clarify for us whether you're a civil engineer or whether you're a transportation engineer?
I'm actually both. So I graduated with a BSc, Bachelor's in Science and Civil Engineering. But when you do that, you pick a track. You can go geotechnical, you can go transportation, you can go stormwater, you can go structures. So really, I'm a civil engineer with a emphasis in transportation. There's no such thing as a transportation degree. I mean, there may be from a statistics standpoint, but if you're a professional engineer in civil engineering, that's the kind of degree you have.
Right. So you said roadway design is your
Yes.
correct?
Yep, that's my background, correct.
Okay, but have you looked at the trip generation that this project would generate as the approved project versus the proposed project or any of the transportation studies?
No, I can't say I have. I haven't seen. Yeah, I haven't seen any of that data.
Thank you. Those are my only questions. I appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Sarver, I don't have any more questions for you. Did you have anything else?
Oh no, I'm good. Just wanted to
Okay.
put my 2 cents in. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else here or online who wishes to speak in opposition to this application? I don't hear anyone. Then we'll go back to Development Services. And I have a question for Development Services, please. Is there a 35-foot restriction on building height in this area?
Do you mean under the current PD?
It was raised, I believe, by Mrs. Belcher, and she believed that there was a 35-foot building height restriction in this area. I don't believe she was speaking about the PD, the existing PD.
There's no area-wide building height that's effective. Each zoning has its own maximum building heights.
All right, thank you. Anything else from Development Services?
Nothing further.
No, ma'am.
All right, applicant? You
Yes.
have-
Pardon?
Yes, I think you had 2 minutes left over from earlier, and then you have 5 minutes in addition to that.
Great, thank you. For the record, Elise Batzel, Stearns Weaver Miller. I'm going to put off the transportation issues and ask for Steve Henry to address those. But I did want to just reiterate the scope of the remand. Some of the comments, the opposition comments, went pretty far out beyond what the scope of the remand was. So I just wanted to provide that for the record. Specifically, I'm reading from the verbatim. This is Stacy White. I'm going to roll it all into a remand. The height compatibility issue, I would like for the zoning hearing master to analyze the angles, the distances, the line of sight, and take a look at whether or not the screening is adequate. And then to also look at the access issue that was previously whether emergency access was permitted. So I just want to remind everyone that the staff and the Planning Commission previously found this project compatible at 4 stories, but we have reduced the height of the buildings that are closest to the residences to 3 stories from 4 stories. We've also provided line of sight and additional testimony from our experts, David Smith, supplementing the discussions related to the line of sight and confirming that in his expert opinion, the buffering, screening, and line of sight was more favorable to the surrounding neighborhood than what the commercial and the existing development entitlements are today. With respect to Ms. Belcher talked about it being consistent and comparable, but I need to correct that on the record because what is required is that it's consistent and compatible. Your comprehensive plan specifically talks about compatibility not being the same as, but there are a number of ways that compatibility is ensured, like buffering and screening and setbacks. And your staff, the Planning Commission, and our experts have found that the prior approval and this new approval are compatible with the surrounding areas. Ms. Belcher also testified a lot about compatibility, but there isn't any evidence that Ms. Belcher is a certified planner or any kind of expert on compatibility. And so with respect to those comments, with respect to whether it is or is not compatible, her testimony wouldn't be expert testimony for the record. I would like to turn it over, and then I'll finish up after Steve Henry, but I would like Steve Henry to address the access on Miller Road, and also to remind this group of the trip generation between what is currently existing on the site today under the approved zoning, and also between what is being proposed. And if I may share my screen so that Steve can talk about those, I would appreciate it.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay. Good evening. Steve Henry, Lincoln Associates, 5023 West Laurel, Tampa 33607. So what's up before you are the graphics that were presented previously at the hearing. And what this is a comparison of what the traffic would be with the zoning today, which is in green, versus what we're proposing. So you can see from a daily standpoint, the approved zoning would have about 5,200 trips per day, whereas our project would have about 1,416.
All right, can we just stop right there?
Sure.
And I just want this to be very clear.
Yes.
That the existing approvals on this subject property, is it your opinion that the existing approvals would potentially generate 5,282 trips per day? And okay. Got some interruptions online, I believe. And with the modifications, the trip generation would be 1,416 trips per day. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
Then we've also looked at the AM and PM peak hours. So if you look at, in this graphic, this provides the AM peak hour, which is on the left, which the existing zoning would generate 214 trips, whereas the proposed would be 126. And then the PM peak hour, the proposed would be 506 versus our proposal, which is 122. So from that standpoint, the idea that this would generate, that this project is have more traffic is incorrect. It'll actually have significantly less. And in addition to that, the comment about the access or the impact on Miller Road. The current zoning has 2 access points on Miller Road, full access points. We will only have an emergency. So the impact on Miller Road will be significantly higher than what we're proposing. 1, we don't have any access to it. 2, we're a significant decrease in traffic.
1 second. The existing approval will have a would have a full access on Miller Road.
2 full access.
2 full accesses on Miller Road. And that, would that be available for the retail commercial area and for the 86 townhomes area? Or are they somehow separated, or are you familiar with that?
It just shows an arrow on the plan, so it does not disseminate between what that arrow is for. So it would be able to serve both the retail and the residential.
Okay.
I'm trying to share that, Steve, for you here. This is an overlay, but at least it shows you the access points. I'm not sure if you can see my cursor.
Wrong way. Yeah, there you go. The approved development, that graphic on the left, could you, okay, I see one access down toward the, I guess the southern end of that, the top of the top parcel. Where's the other access?
So on 60, can you see my cursor?
Yes, I can see your cursor.
Here's
Well, we're
one.
looking on Miller Road.
Here's one on Miller Road, and here's
Okay.
the second one on Miller Road. So there's actually 2 on Miller Road and 2 on 60 under the approved.
Okay.
We were assuming 1 on each, but now this has been eliminated to be emergency only. And if I just may, Madam Hearing Officer, I'm sorry to interrupt, but a knockbox, to address one of the opposition's testimony, a knockbox is a big concrete structure that sits in there that can only be knocked by an emergency vehicle. So there is no way for regular traffic to go in and out. It is, you cannot move those unless you're like a big fire truck.
Okay. And so again, I want to make sure I understand. The approved development right now, what could be built on this site, would put potentially the traffic from that 25,000 square foot of commercial and 50,000 square foot of retail, put it directly out onto Miller Road, all of that traffic, plus the 86 townhomes, all of that traffic potentially out on Miller Road at 2 access points.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
And then finally, to address the traffic study. So the traffic study was done in conjunction with the zoning. We started this process last year. So the counts were actually done October of last year. And it has been updated on a number of occasions to address the access and most recently updated September of this year to address the access configuration with the full access to State Road 60 and emergency access to Miller Road.
All right, so there was testimony earlier that the traffic study was outdated, and one of the speakers believed that it was from 2015. Do you know anything about that? Is there something about a traffic study from 2015?
Sure, there was probably a traffic study done in 2015 for something out there, but the traffic study that was done for this project was done in accordance with your code and just recently conducted.
Did your firm do that?
Yes, we did.
Okay, so you did that last year in 2021.
We did the counts in 2021, and then the original report was actually filed in February, and then again updated as late as September to address the access configuration.
Okay.
That
Thank you.
concludes my presentation. Unless you got any questions.
All right, don't have any more for you, I don't believe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes the applicant's rebuttal. Thank you very much, Madam Hearing Officer.
All right, thank you, Ms. Betzel. I'm just looking at my notes to make sure I don't have any more questions. I don't, so that will conclude the hearing then on application Major Mod 22-0689.
The next item then is agenda item B2, rezoning standard 22-0812. The applicants are Petru and Lavina Volleson. The request is withdrawn from AS1 to NAR to RSC2. Madam Hearing Officer, this was remanded ostensibly to add additional comments that were missing regarding the school board comments. Those you've received a revised report this evening that has added those school board comments to the project. Again, that was the purpose of the remand, is to get those comments into the record because they were not provided at the previous hearing and didn't need to be provided before this could proceed to the Board of County Commissioners. Isis Brown will provide staff recommendation after presentation by the applicant.
All right, thank you, Mr. Grady. We'll hear from the applicant.
Good evening, Madam Hearing Officer. Todd Pressman, excuse me, 200 2nd Avenue South, number 451 in St. Petersburg. This request is seeking rezoning from AR Agricultural Rural and Agricultural Single Family, AS1, to Single Family Residential RSC2. It is in the urban service area. The site acreage is 4.2 acres, more or less, and is in the Boyette Community Plan area. You'll see that both staffs recommend approval. So I'm just going to highlight some points. You'll, of course, have the reports in your file and look at those a little closer. Zoning staff knows the properties to the northeast and west are subject site, or for regard to subject site, are within the Res 2 future land use category. They note the size and depth of the subject parcel in relation to other parcels would create a zoning development pattern that is consistent with the existing zoning and development pattern of the residential area. The Planning Commission also recommends the consistency, noting the urban service area. They list quite a few policies in support. They note the rezoning is consistent with policy 1.1, 1.2 of future land use element. The resulting rezoning will allow 8 units, which they also find is consistent and compatible in the area. consistent with the character, with the character of the area, and the LDC required buffers and setbacks would be sufficient. And they determined that the residential use would support the vision of the South Shore area-wide systems community plan. So with that, we ask for your consideration and approval.
Thank you, Mr. Pressman.
Any questions?
No questions for you.
Thank you.
And be sure and sign in. Okay, Development Services.
Good evening, Isis Brown, Development Services. As mentioned before, this case, the request is to rezone from AR to RSC2. The surrounding properties is in the future land use category of Res 2. The adjacent properties are zoned PD to the north and west, AR to the east, and Dormant Road to the south. And as stated, this case, the school board's comments were not included, and they did state that additional capacity does not exist in the adjacent service areas at the high school levels, and that this is an analysis for adequate facilities only, and it's not determination of school concurrency, and a school concurrency review will be issued prior to preliminary plat or site plan approval. Based on previous, staff finds the request approvable. I'm available for any questions.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Brown. No questions for you. Planning Commission?
Carly Llanos with Planning Commission staff. This is this property is 4.2 acres. It's located. It's located at 17438 Dorman Road. It's north of Dorman Road, west of Boyette Road, east of Egret Landing Place, south of Fishhawk Crossing Boulevard. The subject site is in the urban service area and is located within the limits of the South Shore area-wide systems. Planning Commission staff understands that at the Board of County Commissioners public hearing on August 25th, 2022, the board requested a remand to the October 17, 2022 zoning hearing master meeting. The remand was for the purpose of giving Hillsborough County School Board an opportunity to review the agency, to review the request and provide some agency comments. We currently understand that the property has a residential 2 future land use designation, which allows residential. It does not allow multifamily, but single family residential, just for the record. Residential 2 also allows suburban scale neighborhood commercial, office uses, multi-purpose projects. The Res 2 future land use designation allows up to 2 dwelling units per the acre or 0.25 floor area ratio for non-residential. The area is mostly composed of lot sizes between 5,000 and 10,000 square feet with usually townhome or single family typical housing. The applicant is requesting rezoning to the residential single family conventional 2. The applicant has not specified what type of housing product they would construct. However, as stated previously, the residential 2 future land use designation does not allow for multifamily. So with that, the proposed rezoning is consistent with policy 1.1 and 1.2 by meeting minimum density. Under the Res 2 future land use category, the minimum density is 6 dwelling units an acre. The request is consistent with objective, sorry, I misstated. Under the Res 2 category, the minimum density to be reached is 6 dwelling units, sorry. The request is consistent with Objective 8, Objective 9, and the accompanying policies, as the residential single-family conventional 2 zoning district is permitted within the Res 2 flu category. The subject property is consistent with Objective 16 and the accompanying policies of the future land use element. The applicant has requested a standard rezoning, which doesn't require a site plan. However, the subject site will most likely be developed with single-family or townhomes, which is compatible with the surrounding uses. The request is consistent with the South Shore area-wide systems community plan, which encourages housing opportunities for all income groups to be maintained. The applicant is proposing a residential zoning category that would support the vision of the South Shore area-wide community plan. And Planning Commission has not received any new information revising the applicant's request or site plan. Therefore, the recommendation remains unchanged. Overall, the proposed standard rezoning would allow for a development that is compatible with the existing and planned development pattern found in the surrounding area and is consistent with the unincorporated Hillsborough County Comprehensive Plan. Based upon those considerations, the Planning Commission staff finds that the proposed rezoning standard is consistent with the unincorporated Hillsborough County Comprehensive Plan. And I will stay on if you have any questions.
All right, thank you, Ms. Llanos. All right, is there anyone here or online who wishes to speak in support of this application? I don't hear anyone. Is there anyone here or online who wishes to speak in opposition to this application? Don't hear anyone. All right, Development Services, anything further?
Nothing further.
All right, and applicant, anything further?
Just placing emphasis, we've had no calls into Development Services. I haven't received any calls in opposition. And of course, as you called, no one was here. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Pressman. This will close the hearing on rezoning standard 22-0812.
The next item is agenda item C1, rezoning standard 22-0926. The applicant is Capola Paul A. Jr. trustee. The request is rezoned from agricultural rural to AS 0.4 with restrictions. Isis Brown will provide staff recommendation as after presentation by the applicant. I will note, Madam Hearing Officer, that this item also has a related comprehensive plan amendment. This was directed by the board for the zoning to be heard concurrently with that comprehensive plan amendment. It's my understanding that the public hearing date for the comprehensive plan amendment has not been set yet. Therefore, when that hearing date is set for the comprehensive plan amendment, this zoning item will be scheduled for that hearing. As of right now, will be scheduled for the December 13th board date, and at that December 13th board date, we would announce the hearing date and the continuance date for the zoning item to be heard concurrently with the comprehensive plan amendment date, because I will assume at that point they will have established the hearing date for the comprehensive plan amendment. So again, your filing deadlines do not change with that, but I did want to note that for the record for anybody that may be wanting to speak on this and interested to this case as to when it will proceed to the board meeting. Again, after presentation by the applicant, Isis Brown will provide staff recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Grady. All right, we'll hear from the applicant.
Madam Hearing Officer, one housekeeping item before we start. The name is spelled incorrectly. Oh.
It's CAPPOLA, the application, and the reports have one P and two L's.
I understand. Could you please step up one more second, please? I just need you to state your name and address for the record.
My name is Paul Capola. I currently live at 10403 Pontefino Circle in Trinity, Florida, and I'm the applicant.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Mr. Capola, also sign in with the clerk. Thank you.
Madam Hearing Officer Todd Pressman, 202nd Avenue South, number 451 in St. Petersburg. So this issue is a rezone from AR to AS .04-R for restriction to one single family. There's a companion future land use amendment that Brian spoke to. Next slide, please. Oh, thank you. The applicant simply desires to build a single-family home on 5 acres. Site is 5.01 acres. Location, next slide, please, is on Boy Scout Road in Odessa and Keystone, as you can see the location here. Next slide, please. Characteristics, the site has 736 linear feet in Boy Scout. Single-family home would adhere to area development. Again, restricted one single-family home under the restriction, under the R restriction. Currently, it's 2.58 acres of uplands and 2.43 acres of lowlands. Next slide, please. History is the applicant purchased the parcel in 2004. Working with Tony Garcia, he directed a CPA, or comprehensive plan amendment, CPA 19-09, which was heard by the Board of County Commissioners on March 10th, 2002. Commissioners remanded it to bring forward a companion rezoning to place on the record the uniquenesses and singularities of the site so that it would be consistent with the future land use category and the comprehensive plan. Very simple goal is to build one home on 5-acre lot. Next slide, please. Build one home on 5-acre lot is a very unusual situation. The lot is unbuildable because Keystone Community Plan does not recognize density credits on wetlands. Next slide, please. Mr. Capola is going to go ahead and speak on these next many slides.
Thank you, Madam Hearing Officer. In reference to the last point that Mr. Pressman discussed about the Keystone Community Plan, it is my position that the Keystone Community Plan does not apply. The Keystone Community Plan is within the Hillsborough County Comprehensive Plan for the unincorporated Hillsborough County, and I'll explain that in a minute as we go further along in the slides. There was some issue raised about due diligence when I purchased the property back in 2004. These are some public records that show that it was part of Citrus Green, that it's a vacant residential lot, indicating that it was buildable. Next slide, please. This is another example saying that it's part of platted Citrus Green community. Next slide, please. This particular application will not increase density. If you look at the photograph to the right, you'll see just below the parcel with the star, which is the subject property, there's a small parcel of land that is now currently owned by ELAP. Before ELAP purchased that land, it was part of a CB Grove's large parcel, and my parcel was separated off. That smaller parcel is to the south by ELAP is only about 3 to 4 acres. My parcel is over 5 acres. Combined, because of the wetlands, applying the Keystone Community Plan, it would be allowed to have one dwelling unit on it. That is owned by ELAP. It is non-conforming. It will never have a dwelling unit on it. There is no increase in density by approving my application. Next slide, please. This is the total area of that is either owned by ELAP now or will be approved in at some point. It's a win-win situation because basically the ELAP little parcel of land that they have is not connected to these lands, and there's a nonconformity issue here. And by approving my comp plan amendment, it would allow them to make that a parcel part of the larger parcel if they wanted to use for a trailhead or something along those lines, because any development on that small parcel, which is the only access to Boy Scout Road, might be considered a taking under the law. Next parcel, please. Next slide, please. Keystone Community Plan is very simple. It's to continue to be a rural community, protect the water resources, which are paramount, scattered development, compatibility between new and existing uses, and maintaining low-density residential development at a minimum of 1 unit per 5 acres. Next slide, please. Basically, the big picture is protect the area from suburban and urban sprawl. I have one single family home I'm looking to put on 5 acres. Next slide, please. This is in the Keystone Community Plan. It basically says homes built on various size lots and in scattered development pattern. Next slide, please. This is where I'm going to address the no density credits. It's in the Keystone Community Plan. It says no density credits will be assigned to wetland areas for new development. This does not apply to a single 5-acre lot. It only applies to cluster developments based on the way that the community plan is written. Next slide, please. This is an excerpt from that community plan, and the entire section is listed related to cluster development conditions separated by semicolons and the word "and." Each one of those bullet points talks about issues and characteristics of a cluster development. There's discussions about stormwater management. There's discussions about open spaces. There's discussing about community drainage basins. And that second bullet point is the point of contention here. No density credits will be assigned to wetland areas for new development. And I believe the spirit of this clause, based on the way it's worded, is related to cluster developments and where it is in the document. And this is newly discovered information that I don't believe the planning board had, and I didn't have the opportunity to explain this to the planning board or the planning commission until at this very time. So next slide, please. If there was going to be a density credit restriction it would have been in the residential section further up in the document. This is on page 4, and I will be providing a copy of the document for the record. And where it talks about residential developments, and it says maintaining a low-density residential development within a minimum of 1 unit per 5 acres, consistent with the comprehensive plan. That's exactly what I'm looking to do. Next slide, please. This is from Barbara Aderhold. She is the Keystone Civic Association board member and a member of the future land use committee. She basically said she's not opposed to the one home. She is concerned about a precedent. She says it's not a radical departure from the surrounding area. Next slide, please. Precedent, just to address this briefly. Board of County Commissioners, as you know, it will be acting in a legislative capacity in this matter. Precedent is a principle that can either be binding or persuasive. Any issue of precedent in this matter would be considered a judicial conditional venue. Precedent really is, we'd be looking at practically a mirror image of the circumstances of my property, and it's very distinguishable, and I'll get into that in a minute.
Mr. Capola?
Yes, ma'am.
When you say the Board of County Commissioners will be acting in a legislative capacity in this matter, are you speaking about the comprehensive plan amendment?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe that's Florida Supreme Court had ruled that is a legislative.
Right, and that is not before me.
Correct.
Before me is only the rezoning.
Right, exactly. As I said, Board of County Commissioners will be acting in a legislative capacity, and yes, that is
Okay,
correct.
thank you. I just wanted to make that clear. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Next slide, please. Board of County Commissioners, even if it contravenes the Keystone Community Plan's a challenge, this is from Director Gormley. The challenge with this Keystone Community Plan discourages basically, densities greater than 1 per 5. It's not an absolute prohibition. So basically, the Board of County Commissioners will look at my situation in a vacuum and, all the circumstances that is distinguishable. Next slide, please. Commissioner White, Director Gormley had some conversation that trying to build a record here, set context on the record that would make this why it's been remanded to make context on the record that is distinguishable. Next slide, please. Again, Dr. Wright and Director Gormley, what if we bring a PD zoning together with a comp plan, which we're here doing today? Next slide, please.
Well, okay.
Well, eventually at the board, at the county commissioner,
All
Board of
right.
County Commissioners will hopefully.
You're not requesting a PD rezoning though, right? You're requesting a standard rezoning with a restriction.
Right, but it's coupled with the PD rezoning to go from AR to AE 1 unit per 2.5 acres, which I'm going to be required to do anyway because of the
Okay,
comprehensive.
let's be clear. You've got a comp plan amendment and you've got a standard rezoning, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, there's no plan amendments, plan development zone rezoning. Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry.
I'm getting tongue tied too, that's all right.
No,
I understand.
My mouth is a little dry, I'm sorry.
Okay.
So basically, how do we not set precedent? Provide context on the record that evidence is facts and unique that is distinguishable. Next slide, please. The facts that are unique and distinguishable is that it will not increase density. It corrects the nonconformity with the ELAP parcel. I exercised due diligence. Property records indicated that it was part of Citrus Green, a vacant buildable lot. Historically, taxes buildable residential lot on property taxes does not conflict with the Keystone Community Plan and does not contribute to urban sprawl. Next slide, please. Piercing the community plan, just briefly touch on, it's really high standard. It usually involves, as you would with a piercing a corporate veil, intentional misconduct, abuse, wrongdoing, complete disregard for the integrity of the community plan, et cetera. And that's not what we're doing here. Next slide, please. This is, then why are we here? Again, we're here because even if the Keystone Community Plan does not apply, I still, because of the Hillsborough County Comprehensive Plan that I'm zoned AR, I have to go to AE zoning because the AR requires 80% of uplands, and I have just over 50% of uplands. Next slide, please.
Before you go, Mr. Capola, you said several times you don't believe the Keystone Odessa Community Plan applies. Is that really what you mean, or are you just arguing that it's an interpretation?
I really believe it's what I mean. I had a back burner to this whole thing because my mom got sick and passed away. And I started working on the PowerPoint over the weekend. I have a law degree. I'm a JD. I've been to an accredited law school. I'm not a member of the Florida Bar, but I do a lot of legal writing. And when I'm prepping for this hearing, I'm reading it. And I'm seeing where it is in the document. I'm seeing how the language is tied together. I'm seeing that it applies to cluster developments, that it doesn't apply to a single lot. And
Okay, so I understand. So you believe then that the language of the plan applies a certain way, and it sounds like more of an interpretation issue to me.
I talked to several lawyers today, and they concur. So
okay, and then let me ask you this: if you do not get this rezoning or this comp plan amendment, the approvals are not forthcoming, what can you do with this property?
Well, if it doesn't get approved, and with no disrespect, I'm going to challenge it in court based on.
No, that's not what I'm asking. What can you do with this property? Can you build a home on it?
No, because the case you're saying the Keystone Community Plan overlay
All right.
does not permit me to do it because I don't get any density credits for the wetlands.
Okay. Can you build anything on this property?
I could probably sell oranges or something along those lines.
All right, I understand. Did you buy this property for the purpose of building a home?
Eventually, yes.
Okay.
I went through a divorce and got back burnered, and my
That's
children
fine.
wanted to live in a kind of a gated community, and that's what I did. And I always intended on building on it eventually.
Okay. All right, thank you. Mr. Pressman, did you have?
One other point I'd like to just quickly make is that, again, something that came up today, there's some issues, and I'll put it on the record, some issues related to the recent adopted private property rights amendment that were put in place that I'd just like, to make note that they're going to be put on the record.
Okay, thank you.
In response to your question, hearing officer, I would say that there's two directions here. One is the questions that Mr. Capola has raised about how it applies. But secondly, the reason we're here and to really put focus on this is as this was remanded from the Board of County Commissioners and we had the transcript for you, they wanted us to move forward with restrictions and build a record so that, according to Mr. Gormley, that it would be corresponding with the comp plan amendment, which would make it distinguished, unique, and singular, which would then be much more acceptable to the Board of County Commissioners. And those comments are very clear in the transcript.
Would you go back over the procedural history of this matter then? Because it's under rezoning standards in our agenda. It's not under remands. How did it get here?
We appeared before the Board of County Commissioners for just a comp plan amendment. Okay. There was a lot of discussion. The direction of that discussion was the commissioners were compelled to approve it. There were comments made that they would almost approve it that evening. Okay. But Mr. Gormley directed them, in concerns of piercing the community plan, to then bring forward a zoning amendment or zoning application that would provide more distinct controls and uniquenesses. Okay. And that they would be much more open-minded and accepting of the comp plan amendment. So we're here at that direction.
Okay, I understand. Okay. Thank you.
Next slide, please. These are some community support regarding the property. Next slide, please. And more community support. Next slide, please. This is the Planning Commission staff report from the last time around from 1909, noting would not result in a radical departure, and that it would be in line with development patterns surrounding uses. Next slide, please. And again, from a Planning Commission presentation, the end result would still be one buildable lot, as Mr. Capola stated in the previous presentation. Next slide, please. At the Board of County Commissioners, this is noted from a question from Commissioner White to Mr. Gormley, noting that it was the board's motion, providing some context in the record of what would distinguish this parcel from others would be helpful and beneficial in setting the uniquenesses of this and not establishing a precedent. So that is the direction that we've been going in. Next slide, please. And again, Mr. Cohn noting it's a difficult situation. He was a little incredulous that they can't find some help, but again, saying this is the direction that we should go in, and the commissioners were much more positive in that respect. Next slide, please. And Commissioner Cohn noting there's got to be a way to build the record. I can't believe this little piece just came in tonight that we should be able to hang something on, which is again the direction Mr. Gormley gave us. Next slide, please. And again, another transcript, primarily Mr. Gormley noting that there are other issues that will help narrow the field down. This is a pretty unique situation. It would not set a precedent for similar ones because they don't have similar facts, and we'll identify that to the best ability when it comes back if the continuance is granted, which it was. Next slide, please. Again, this is saying, again, trying to find a solution by Commissioner Overman. Next slide, please. Commissioner Myers, again, saying she would support the continuance, likes all the suggestions and the intent, and want that the applicant should be able to do what he would like with the property. Next slide, please. And Commissioner White noting he was inclined to adopt the plan amendment. Next slide, please. Looking at the staff report in terms of consistency and compatibility. Next slide, please. So it would be exactly the same as noted in the staff report, north, south, east, and west, so it would certainly be compatible and consistent. Next slide, please. And compatible with surrounding development. You can see just by looking at the map that there are 4 subdivisions, developments in the immediate area that are compatible with this site. Next slide, please. And those are pointed out that there are at one home less than 5 acres. See the site in black, and you can see the subdivisions that have been approved in those areas. Some are significantly less than 1 dwelling unit per acre. Next slide, please. Zoning analysis, Keystone Odessa notes 3 different petitions that we pulled, 05, 2088, and the other 2, which were approved at less than 1 unit per 5 acres in the immediate area. Other sites nearby. Next slide, please. Staff report for 220926. This is from Development Services, consistent with the existing zoning and development, compatible with the surrounding development, again found by Development Services Department. Next slide, please. And recommendation is that they find the request is approvable based on the consideration restricting development to 1 residential unit, again by Development Services. Next slide, please. So we thank you for your consideration. I think we did get across to you why we're here and the purposes for being here and the direction that we are following from the Board of County Commissioners meeting on the comp plan amendment.
Okay, and I want to pose a question to you also, Mr. Pressman, basically the same thing I asked Mr. Coppola, that if the approval were not granted for the rezoning, would he be able to build even 1 home on this property?
My understanding is he would not, and that's very clearly defined in the record.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Development Services, please.
Good evening, Isis Brown, Development Services. Reporting on case 220926. The request is to rezone from agricultural rural AR to agricultural single-family estate with restrictions. The applicant proposes a restriction limiting development of to the parcel of 1 single-family unit. The proposed zoning for AS 0.4 permits single-family conventional and mobile home residential development in a low-density rural environment, which encourages agricultural activities and their supporting uses. The minimum lot size in the AS or estate AS 0.4 district is 2.5 acres. The rezoning will be heard concurrently with Comprehensive Plan Amendment CPA 19-09 to request a change for future land use classification from AR agricultural rural 1 to 5 acres to agricultural estate 1 to 2.5 acres. Okay. The site is located in an area comprised of rural agricultural and rural low-density residential uses. The adjacent properties are zoned to the north, AR, Rural and Boy Scout Road; to the south, AR and PD 940278 Plan Development, the Echo Lakes Estate Phase 2, a single-family residential subdivision with AS1 land development requirements. To the west, PD 00-0624 with permitted minimum lot sizes of 5 acres and 2.25 acres. The surrounding area consists of properties within the AR, a future land use category, and permits agricultural and single-family residential uses. The site is located in the rural area and is within the limits of the Keystone Odessa Community Plan. The rezoning request is concurrent with CPA 19-09, which requests to change the future land use from AR 1 acre to 5 acres, 1 acre, 5 acre to agricultural estate 1 to 2.5 acres. The size and depth of the parcel in relation to other adjacent agricultural and residential uses would create a zoning development pattern that is consistent with the existing zoning and development pattern of the agricultural and residential uses zoning district in the area. However, the site is vacant and irregularly shaped, consisting of plus or minus 2.43 acres of wetlands to the southern portion of the parcel. The site is also located along Boy Scout Road, which is designated a rural scenic corridor. Moreover, the parcel is located in a wellhead resource protected area. Therefore, allowable uses may further be prohibited and restricted in accordance to the Land Development Code. The applicant proposes restriction development to 1 residential unit, with the proposed restriction limiting the parcel to 1 unit and the surrounding development pattern, which is consistent of the mixed of zoning district and minimum lot sizes ranging from 1 to 5 acres. Staff find the request compatible with the surrounding development pattern, subject to the approval of CPA 1909. Based on the above consideration, staff finds the request approvable, subject to the Comp Plan Amendment 1909 with the following restrictions: restricting development to 1 residential unit. This ends my presentation. I'm available for any questions.
Ms. Brown, just if you can answer this, basically the same question I asked the applicant, and that is, without the rezoning, is the property owner able to build a single home on this property?
Based on my understanding, no.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Brown. We'll hear from Planning Commission.
Carliano, Senior Planner with Planning Commission staff. Madam Zoning Hearing Master, I have 1 item to correct on the Planning Commission staff report for the record. On page 2, the last sentence of the last bullet point under the context states at the January 11, 2021 Planning Commission public hearing. It should be October 4, 2021 Planning Commission public hearing. Okay. Now, also for the record, PC staff does not recommend comprehensive plan amendments to property owners or their designees. A comprehensive plan amendment is the sole choice of the property owner or his designee. Okay. I'll continue on with my testimony, if you don't mind.
Wait, would you say that one more time, please? I'm not sure I understood it.
Yes. For the record, PC staff does not recommend comprehensive plan amendments to property owners.
Oh.
A comprehensive plan amendment is the sole choice of a property owner or his designee. The applicant had stated on their PowerPoint that the Planning Commission staff recommended they go through a comp plan amendment, and that's not accurate.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. The 5-acre property is located west of Boy Scout Road and north of Echo Lake Drive. It is in the rural area and it's within the limits of the Keystone Odessa Community Plan. The applicant is requesting to rezone the property from agricultural rural to agricultural single family 0.4 restricted for the development of 1 residential lot on the subject site. The restriction is to restrict the site to one dwelling unit only. This request is concurrent with the Comprehensive Plan Amendment 19-09. The CPA originated in October of 2019 Plan Amendment cycle. It went before the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission voted 7-0 for a recommendation of inconsistency on October 4, 2021. The CPA package and staff report was mailed out to the Board of County Commissioners and went before the Board of County Commissioners on March 10th, 2022. And it went with a recommendation for inconsistency. At the Board of County Commissioners public hearing, the board directed staff to process the amendment with a concurrent rezoning. As Brian Grady had already stated, that date has not been set yet. Now, the property has an agricultural rural 1-5 or AR 1-5 future land use designation, which allows for farms, ranches, feedlots, residential uses, rural scale neighborhood commercial uses, office uses, industrial uses related to ag uses, mining related activities. The AR 1-5 future land use surrounds the property on all sides. The property currently has agricultural rural zoning and it's also located to the northeast, south, and southwest. Planned development zoning districts are located to the west, further south of the subject site. The surrounding area has an agricultural single-family quasi-public institutional uses. The agricultural uses are located west of the site, and single-family residential uses are located to the north and south of the site. Land owned by Hillsborough County is located to the south and southwest of the site and is designated for public, quasi-public institutional uses, as I already stated. The subject site is currently vacant and has 2.43 acres of wetlands. According to Objective 4 and Policy 4.1 of the Future Land Use Element of the Comprehensive Plan, the rural area is intended for the preservation of agricultural uses and low-density rural residential development pattern. There are approximately 2.43 acres of wetlands on the site, and the site does not qualify for an environmentally sensitive credit, as it is also within the limits of the Keystone Odessa Community Plan that permits density calculation according to upland acreage only. With only 2.58 acres of uplands in the AR 1-5 future land use category, the applicant does not have enough acreage to develop one lot, even though the gross acreage of the site is 5 acres. Okay? The request is not consistent with Objective 9, Policy 9.1 of the Future Land Use Element. The subject site is in the AR 1-5, as already stated, which permits one dwelling unit per 5 acres. And the AS 0.4 zoning district is not compatible with the zoning district for this future land use category, even if the applicant is proposing a restriction to one dwelling unit only. The proposed rezoning is not consistent with the neighborhood protection policies, Objective 16, and the subsequent policies, and the community design component, Goals 7 and 12, and the accompanying policies, which seeks to protect existing neighborhoods by directing new development to be compatible with the surrounding area. The request is not consistent with the surrounding area composed of low-density, large lot residential dwellings and agricultural uses. The request is better suited for residential 1 and residential 2 future land use categories, where such densities are permitted and located further to the south of the property. Under the water quality and quantity goals, which is wetlands, open space, environment, wildlife, and natural systems, that is page 23 of the Livable Communities elements in the Keystone Odessa Community Plan. The first bullet point states that density calculations for clustered developments in the community will be based upon upland areas. And the second bullet point states that no density credits will be assigned to wetland areas for new development. Okay? The request is not consistent with the Keystone Odessa Community Plan as stated previously. The community plan only permits density calculations based on upland acreage. There are only 2.58 acres of uplands on the site. The applicant will need at least 5 acres of uplands to be able to be considered for one dwelling unit. Granting a rezoning to the AS 0.4 restricted has the unintended effect of granting the applicant a density that is in direct conflict with the adopted policy guidance in the community plan. And this would set precedent for to allow for higher density in areas where they are expressly prohibited. Now, at this time of the filing of the staff report that you have in the record, On October 5th, 2022, transportation and zoning comments were not yet available. Thus, they weren't taken into consideration for planning commission staff finding. However, even with those agency comments provided, even with the staff report provided by the other departments, planning commission staff's recommendation for inconsistency would not change. Overall, the proposed rezoning would allow for the development that is not consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies for unincorporated Hillsborough County Comprehensive Plan. Based upon those considerations, the Planning Commission staff finds that the proposed rezoning is inconsistent with the unincorporated Hillsborough County Comprehensive Plan. And I will be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Yes, Ms. Llanos, just to be clear, I mean, the parcel is 5 acres. And so in the Planning Commission's staff report, the findings specifically that the rezoning would allow development that is not consistent with the comprehensive plan. If there were no wetlands on the property, that would not be the case. Is that correct? Is it just because there are wetlands on the property and there's not 5 acres of upland?
The Keystone Odessa Community Plan has a strict requirement. We don't ignore the community plans. They actually supersede in many cases the future land use element. It's wherever it's more restricted. So right now the Keystone Odessa Community Plan is more restricted. It says that you cannot grant the wetland environmental sensitivity credit, which is allowed under the future land use element for other properties. But if you're in the Keystone Odessa Plan, you cannot have that. You have to base your density calculations off of the uplands. So this is the conflicting issue that the applicant has on his property.
Thank you. I understand. Thanks for clarifying that. All right. We'll go to the public then. Is there anyone here or online who wishes to speak in support of this application? In support. All right. I don't hear anyone. Is there anyone here or online who wishes to speak in opposition to this application? Please come forward. Okay. You can pull that microphone down a little further if you don't mind. Thank you. We want to make sure we can hear you.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Hearing Master. My name is Janice Manson-Heen. My address is P.O. Box 95, Odessa, Florida, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Keystone Civic Association Board of Directors. While the KCA, or the Keystone Civic Association, is not opposed to one single-family home on this property, it is very concerned that this would in any way set a precedent or pierce our Keystone Odessa Community Plan. The Planning Commission has found 19-09 to be inconsistent with the comprehensive plan and states granting a rezoning to AS 04-R has the unintended effect of granting the applicant a density that is in direct conflict with the adopted policy guidance in the community plan and would set a precedent that would allow for higher densities in areas where they are expressly prohibited. Overall, the proposed rezoning would allow the development that is not consistent with the goals, objectives, and the policies for the unincorporated Hillsborough County Comprehensive Plan. We realize that this is only one single-family home, but we are very concerned that this could set up a domino effect unless there would or could be unique circumstances that would guarantee that this would not allow this to occur again. That this would not allow this to occur again. Having seen nothing in writing on these unique circumstances, the KCA cannot support rezoning 22-0926 and supports the Planning Commission's finding of inconsistency. Thank you.
Thank you. Be sure and sign in with the clerk's office. Thank you. All right. Is there anyone else here or online who wishes to speak in opposition to this application?
I would like to speak. Barbara Adderhold.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, excuse me. Barbara Adderhold, P.O. Box 272879, Tampa, Florida. I concur with everything that Mrs. Mansong Hing has said. I disagree with the applicant that the Keystone Odessa Community Plan does not apply. It most certainly does. And I was digging to look for the density credits, but the lady from the Planning Commission beat me to it where it says no density credits will be assigned to wetland areas for new development. I'm not opposed to the single family home, but wetlands were known on this property from the get-go. I really question that this was part of the citrus green, which was really known as the old Oakley Groves. I would have to look up that, but I don't think it was ever part of it. I believe it was owned by Seabees.
Ms. Aderhold. Ms. Aderhold.
Say again?
Okay, just a question for you. Those two names that you just mentioned, are those subdivisions? Because the applicant raised an issue that he thought it was in a subdivision. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, Citrus Green is a current subdivision.
Okay.
It was once known as Oakley Groves, and it was rezoned back in 2000-ish.
Thank you.
I know that they can put agricultural uses on the property, and I know that's not really what this gentleman would like to do. It's hard to support the rezoning because of the inconsistent plan amendment. And for that reason, I cannot support this, and I ask you not to either. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Aderhold. All right, is there anyone else online or here who would like to speak in opposition to this application? All right, don't hear anyone, then we'll go back to Development Services.
Just want to clarify a couple of points. Again, our review is based on, again, as we note in our report, under perspective, if the comprehensive plan were to be approved, would the zoning be consistent, compatible with the area under an ASO4 plan category? And again, under that standard, the amount of uplands within the property would meet the requirements and where you cannot use the wetlands to count toward the lot size. So again, if under that provision, if the comp plan were approved, then the lot could comply with the standards in the Keystone Community Plan and within the Land Development Code, because again, the Land Development Code mirrors the same requirement that you don't get density credits for the wetlands, and so it would be consistent with that. Again, right now, the lot was subdivided at a point in time they could not qualify as a non-conforming lot, and so that again, it confirms, again, to your question about not being able to build a home, that's correct, that you could not build a home on this without the comp plan amendment, this zoning action, because we could not recognize that as a legal buildable lot to build a home on it. Be happy to answer any other questions.
I guess there's no, is there anything in the record, Mr. Grady, that you know of that tells us how this lot came to be, how it came to be subdivided as it is?
It was subdivided at some point in the past, again, by the prior property owner. Again, the applicant is correct. I think they purchased it this way, but the previous property owner had subdivided it. So, but again, that did not go through our subdivision process. And so that's why, the county can't recognize it as a legal buildable lot. So that's again why they're having to go through this process, so they could have it recognized. If this comp plan were approved and the zoning were approved, then they could have this recognized as a legal lot, and then they could proceed with getting proper permit approvals to construct a home.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, applicant rebuttal.
I'm sorry, I don't know the woman from planning's name, but I'd like to address two comments that she made. One about the staff report, she's saying about the recommendation. That was the zoning staff report. It wasn't the planning staff report on the slide. The second issue was, she said 0 to 7 for not in favor at the planning commission level. That was all before any issues came up about the distinguishing factors that are they didn't take into consideration any precedent issues whatsoever. And that's what was addressed at the Board of County Commissioners level, where let's make this, see if we can find distinguishing factors. So there is no precedent, because I understand the factor of, setting precedent, but you really got to have kind of very almost exact circumstances, and they're very distinguishable, unique factors about this property that impossible for anybody to have it. One of the biggest aspects of it, and to address Mr. Grady's testimony there about your question, what is the history of this property? It was part of a big property parcel called part of CB Groves.
Okay, CB Grove.
CB Groves, right.
Okay.
That all the property west of CB Groves, Boy Scout Road, was sold to ELAP. Well, my parcel was divided off from that parcel back in 2004 when I purchased it from the man who owned CB Groves. And I had an intention of building on it sooner, but because of life changes and stuff like that, I looked to explore to build on it in 2018. And at that point, I applied for a permit and looked into that, and I was told that I can't because of the Keystone Community Plan. At that point, I was also contacted by ELAP with their intention to purchase the land from me as a boundary modification. I was going to go back, and I spoke to my lawyer at the time, to go back to CB Groves and basically address the nonconformity issue on the lot, on the sale, and everything else. And I kind of backburnered that. And as soon as ELAP purchased the 260 acres, all of a sudden their offer to purchase the land from me dried up. And now I have no way to correct it with the prior owner who sold the land and broke it off, because ELAP now owns it. And that was part of the problem as well. To address Janice's comments about the community plan, and Ms. Outerholz, I asked your office, hearing officer master, to really look at the comprehensive plan and look at the language on how it's written. And I understand that you are an attorney, and if you look at it, it's clear, it's crystal clear that provision specifically talks about clustered developments. There's a whole section at the top of the community plan that talks about residential and the 5 acres and everything else. And this section talks specifically about open space, green space, all kinds of things. And then just the way the paragraph flows, it's crystal clear that that's what it means. And I think it's challengeable. I truly believe it's challengeable for interpretation. And that's my position. I mean, if we can just concede that the Keystone Community Plan doesn't apply here, I could simply just go from an AR to an AE and get the restriction on it for the 1 unit on the AS.04, and it would be a simple process. But one of those two things are going to have to happen. Either we're going to have to say it doesn't apply because of the way the language is written, or we're going to have to do the distinguishing factors and kind of attack the Keystone Community Plan. And I'd rather not do the latter. I'd rather just kind of get this passed so I can put a single family home on it.
All right. Could you go back to this? You said earlier that you thought the property was in a subdivision. Why again did you think it was in a subdivision or a proper platted? Did you mean a platted subdivision?
Right, and it's right on what's on the PowerPoint, which I provided copies for you, and you'll be able to see it. These are public records that pull and source this data. And again, I don't want to point any fingers, but it was like that for years. It said citrus green on it for years. And then when I brought this situation up, when I went to Dennis Klein over in permitting, I believe it is, and started bringing it up to Tony, and I said, look, it says citrus green on it. All of a sudden that disappeared. And now it's no longer there. So there was some sort of Scribner's error somewhere along the line. And my intention was, that was my expectation, was to build a single family home on it. And now all of a sudden I can't. So I really did do my due diligence.
Okay.
But it's really not part of citrus green. It's just, it was labeled that way in public records.
All right. Thank you, sir.
And here, so I would just summarize by saying that if it looks like one home per 5 acres, and anyone passing by is going to see one home on 5 acres, it looks like every other home on 5 acres. It's one home on 5 acres. We're looking at an element of the Keystone Odessa plan that commissioners look very closely at. And I'm going to emphasize again, per the direction from Mr. Gormley on how to proceed and the resulting recommendation of support from Development Services and not the Planning Commission, if I misspoke. That's why we're here today. We feel that's well supported and well justified. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pressman. All right, this will close the hearing on rezoning standard 22-0926. We're going to take a quick break. It is 8:20. We're just going to take 5 minutes. Please come back at 8:25 and we'll get restarted. Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, we're reconvening the October 17, 2022 zoning hearing master meeting, and we're ready to call the next case.
The next application is agenda item C2, rezoning standard 22-1169. The applicant is Alan Nunez. The request is to rezone from plan development to commercial general with restrictions. Chris Grant-Leonard will provide staff recommendation after presentation by the applicant.
All right, is our applicant here? Is the applicant online? All right, this is for rezoning 22-1302. Do we have the applicant here online or in the audience?
Madam Hearing Officer, I would suggest at this point I can ask the case planner to see if he can contact. Are you with that?
Yes, come. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I call the wrong one? 1169? I thought that one was continued, Mr.
No, 22-1169 has not been continued, so we're on 22-1169.
All right, thank you. I don't know why I crossed that off then. My error. All right, so rezoning standard 22-1169. Is the applicant here or online? And if not, shall we move to the next case?
We can move to the next case, and I will ask the case planner to also try to contact Mr. Nunez to see if he's planning on attending, and if not, then we can continue that to a later hearing. But for right now, yes, we can move on to the next case, which I'll now introduce. So the next case is agenda item C3, rezoning standard 22-1302. The applicant Sefner 33584 LLC. The request is rezone from residential single-family conventional 6 to a residential duplex conventional 6. Chris Grant-Leonard will provide staff recommendation after presentation by the applicant.
All right, thank you.
Hi, good evening. Julia Perez of 6725 Myrtlewood Road in Northport, Florida, 34287. I am here for the rezoning petition for Sefner 33584 LLC. And we are requesting, if I may put the map on the screen? Thank you. So the applicant and I have considered options for this property, and we have come to the determination that the highest and best use for this property is going to be a one duplex. It is currently zoned RSC 6, so the density is 6. The future land use is 6, and we are requesting that it be rezoned to a RDC 6 to allow for the duplex. Again, the staff we have not received any objections from staff. They have considered it to be consistent and compatible and have considered it for approval. And I'm open for questions.
All right, I don't have any questions for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Make sure you sign in with the clerk's office. All right, development services.
Mr. Grant-Leonard, are you available?
Christopher, can you hear us?
I wonder if he's trying to contact the previous case.
I apologize. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I apologize. I was trying to contact the other applicant. I did. I'll get to that once I finish this. I apologize. I'm hearing officer.
No problem. Thank you.
Yes. Chris Grant-Leonard, Development Services. I'm here to represent Standard Rezoning 22-1302. The applicant is proposing to rezone from the existing RSC 6 residential single-family conventional to RDC 6 residential duplex conventional. The approximate 0.39 acre property is zoned RSC 6 residential single-family conventional. The parcel is vacant. The applicant is proposing to build one duplex consisting of one building with 2 dwelling units. The subject parcel is located 120 feet north of Looking Glass Court and east side of Highview Road. The area consists of single-family residential. The subject parcel is directly adjacent to residential to the east and Property Owners Association common area to the south, both zone PD 01-0349. To the north is an unimproved right-of-way and a single-family lot zoned RSC 6. To the west across Highview Road is a vacant lot and a single-family lot, both zoned AS1. Also to the west is a single-family lot zoned ASC1. The parcel is located in the urban service area. The subject property is designated residential 6, R6 on the future land use map. The Planning Commission finds the proposed use consistent with the comprehensive plan. The surrounding uses are similar to the request, residential, with the allowability of conventional single-family and manufactured homes. Therefore, the rezoning of the subject parcel from RSC 6 to RDC 6 would be consistent with the existing zoning pattern of the area. Based on the residential 6 future land use classification, the surrounding zoning and development pattern, and proposed uses for the RDC 6 zoning district, staff finds the request approvable. That concludes my staff report. I'm glad to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Van Leonard. I don't have any questions for you.
Sure.
All right, Planning Commission.
Carliano, Senior Planner with Planning Commission staff. The subject property is located approximately the east side of Highview Road, south of County Road 574. It's approximately 0.37 acres in size, and it is located within the urban service area and falls within the limits of the Seffner-Mango Community Plan. The applicant requests a rezoning from residential single-family conventional 6 to residential duplex conventional 6. The subject property is designated residential 6 and is surrounded by it on the future land use map. Typical uses in the residential 6 future land use category are residential, non-residential uses that are subject to locational criteria. The request is consistent with the with policy 1.2 of the future land use element, as the site can be considered for a maximum of 2 dwelling units, meeting the minimum density. The request is consistent with policy 16.3 of the future land use element, which the proposed RDC 6 zoning is compatible to the existing development pattern. There are existing RDC 6, this is such a handful to say, RDC 6 zoning located northeast of the site, just north of County Road 574. The request is consistent and promotes the vision of the Seffner-Mango Community Plan by supporting infill development. Overall, staff finds that the proposed use would facilitate growth within the urban service area. It supports the vision of the Seffner-Mango Community Plan and is compatible with the existing development pattern found within the surrounding area. The rezoning would allow for a development that is consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the unincorporated Hillsborough County Comprehensive Plan. So based on those considerations, Planning Commission staff finds the proposed rezoning consistent with the unincorporated Hillsborough County Comprehensive Plan. And I will happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. Okay, we'll go to the public. Is there anyone here or online who wishes to speak in support of this application? Don't hear anyone. Is there anyone here or online who wishes to speak in opposition to this application?
Good evening, ma'am. My name is Andres Perez. My address is 3912 Reflection Dock Drive, Seffner, Florida, 33584. My wife and I purchased this property, or purchased our home, with the understanding that the line of sight behind us was preserved. So now we just found out that there is going to be some construction back there, so it raises some concerns. Some of the concerns we have, ma'am, is the line of sight impact from their proposed property to our backyard. Some other concerns we have are the sidewalks in the area. There are no sidewalks that lead from, or that connect from Highview Road to the main Martin Luther King Road. There's no or very little street lights, which makes it very dangerous for people to walk. The proposed or the cited place where they're going to create the road is very narrow and probably will only be able to fit one car, if that, which is going to make it more difficult for people to get on and off Highview Road. Again, these are all my thoughts and concerns. I do not have any background in traffic management or development or anything like that, but being a property owner that is directly next to the proposed area, it's going to directly impact our way of life. We moved here because my wife and I are both disabled veterans, 100% disabled veterans, and we use our pool for hydrotherapy. And now we're going to have to take more precautions or, to create that safety and create that privacy that we were looking for when we bought this property. Because like I said earlier, it was told to us when we bought this property that nobody was going to be building on the left side or the back side of us. Barring any other questions, thank you.
All right, just a couple. Mr. Perez, I'm just looking at the sort of the aerial view from the property appraiser's website, and I can see, is your property right next to this, this subject property of this rezoning?
The map that she had earlier, my property, the last four would be 1642.
Okay.
So we're literally right next to it.
I see it. And will your driveway, your entrance, be on Reflection Dock Drive?
Correct.
Okay.
My driveway is on Reflection Dock Drive, and that road that's right behind Highview Road, that road doesn't exist yet.
Right, okay, I see.
Which is where they told us that area was the preserve. So they told us it wasn't going to be touched.
I'm sorry. Is your home built?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right. It must be brand new. It doesn't show on the aerial yet.
It is. They broke ground a year and a half ago, and my wife and I have been living in it, or 2 years ago, and we've been living in it in a year.
I see. So your concerns really are visibility and privacy?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right, thank you, sir. Be sure and sign in with the clerk here.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Please come forward.
Hello, my name is Linda Norby, and I reside at 2015 Castle Court in Lakeland, Florida. However, I am the owner of 3813 Highview Road, and that would be directly next to the road that doesn't exist. So I'm kind of that gentleman's neighbor in a way, the closest neighbor, I might say. My thoughts is I just think we're all single-family homes, and it would really look odd to have a duplex in the corner, just one duplex. And also, I don't know how they're going to do that road-wise or whatever. The traffic on Highview is really pepped up, and there's really a lot of accidents on it. It's a very peppy road, very, very peppy. So, yeah, that's my concern. And I just think when we, work hard, spend our money to buy our home, and everything's zoned for a single-family home, you just hope that it kind of stays that way. And that's all.
And I see where your property is as
Yes.
well. I'm looking at the aerial. Is your driveway on Highview?
Highview, yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Okay,
Yes, on Highview.
all right.
And also, the gentleman said, which is true, the sidewalks and the streetlights are a concern. One of the neighbor's trees rotted and fell in front of my daughter's gate. It was so pitch black. it was a mess, but we couldn't see anything. We had to actually go get floodlights and everything to see out there. It's just not very safe that way.
Okay.
Okay? Thank you for your
Thank you, ma'am.
time.
All right, is there anyone else who wishes to speak in opposition to this application? Okay, I don't hear anyone. Development Services, anything further?
Nothing further.
All right, applicant, you have time for rebuttal and summation. In your comments, would you address where will the access point be for this property? Will it be on Highview, or is there going to be a street built behind this property? Well, north of this property, as it shows, like apparently there's a subdivision that isn't developed.
Thank you. All right, so if I may switch to this picture real quick. It has a portion of, let's see. So here's the neighborhood, the subdivision that has been built out. This is Mr. and Mrs. Perez's home.
Ma'am, could you adjust that down a little bit because we're not seeing the whole, it's, if you can. There,
Is that
that's better. Yeah.
All right, thank you. So Mr. and Mrs. Perez reside here and no relationship. We're all Perez's, but no relationship. And then the applicant's parcel is right in here. And as they have spoken to, there is a carved out roadway on paper, but obviously not in real life. And then Miss Linda, I'm sorry, I don't remember her last name, is over in this area somewhere. So what we have been told by transportation is that they will require, this is Stanton Road here, that they will require access through Stanton Road. If it's not required, my applicant, I am sure will not want to clear out the entire road. He will only clear out whatever is necessary, either the property line or whatever is necessary to allow access into the property here, because they do not want access through Highview. As far as the sidewalks are concerned, I am sure Hillsborough County Permit Building is going to request that we put in a sidewalk at our property. Of course, we're not going to do the entire street, but they will ask that we do our property, and of course, we would be willing to do that. And as far as the road being narrow, I mean, that road is only for access of that duplex. I don't see that maybe in the future. I don't foresee the property in the rear being developed. But for the foreseeable time, it's that road will only be to access the duplexes there. And that is all I have. Thank you.
Okay. I guess I'm just, the road that isn't developed, that's apparently county right of way?
I'm assuming, I do not know.
Okay. But you did say that the county will require, you believe the county will require the access to be from that point, not on Highview Road, is that correct?
Yes. Alex from Transportation, I don't remember his last name. I did email with him, and he said that, yes, it would be required, the access through Stanton.
Okay.
Madam Hearing Officer, this is Alex Steady. I'm on the line.
Thank you.
I just wanted to, for the record, Alex Steady, Transportation Review, Hillsborough County. I just wanted to reaffirm that, yes, even without this rezoning, if developing this subject site would require the same access, which is to build that part until the driveway of the subject site on Stanton Avenue, which is an unimproved platted right-of-way that's about plus or minus 50 feet wide. And they, regardless of this rezoning, they would need to, that's how their access would be allowed, because Highview is a collector roadway, and we have special collector roadway spacing requirements in the Land Development Code.
Okay.
And that's
that answers my question then. Thank you. All right, is anything further from the applicant?
No, ma'am, that's all. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. That will close the hearing then on rezoning standard 22-1302.
Madam Hearing Officer, before we go to D1 regarding C2, it would be appropriate at this time to continue this to the November 14th zoning hearing, mass hearing. It's my understanding the applicant will not be attending the hearing tonight, and there's some discussions regarding the status of the request and whether or not he may or may not proceed with the application. So I think it would be appropriate, again, to continue item C2 22-1169 to the November 14th, 22 and 22 zoning hearing, mass hearing, for the applicant opportunity to decide how he wants to proceed with this application. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I should ask, I guess, if there are any members of the public, is there anyone here who wishes to speak to the continuance of rezoning standard 22-1169? Anyone in support? Anyone in opposition? Do not hear anyone. All right, so rezoning standard 22-1169 is continued to the November 14th, 2022 zoning hearing master meeting.
The next item then is agenda item D1, rezoning PD 22-0562. The applicant is 86th Street Holdings LLC. The request is rezoned from RSC 6 in a planned development to a planned development. Tim Lampkin with the county staff will provide staff recommendation after presentation by the applicant.
Thank you. Good evening. Isabel Albert with Half Associates, 1000 North Ashley Drive. I have been sworn in and I do have a presentation, please.
Okay.
Thank you. Next, please. Thank you. So the location of the site, it's a 7.22 acre site. It's on Causeway Boulevard and 86th Street. It is in the greater Palm River area and in the Urban Service area. Just to give you an idea, it's about a half a mile west of US 301. Next, please. This is an overview of the general area. Thank you. The overview of the area. To the north of us, we have a single-family residential with a church. To the east of us, we have all along the Causeway Boulevard, different commercial retail uses there. To the northeast of us, we have a large planned development, which is approved for a recycling facility, utilities at that location, and a wide range of manufacturing and distribution center. To the south of us, we have the FDOT pond, but we also have a larger multifamily development. And to the west of us, we have a large multifamily development, as well as over 100,000 square feet of storage use and 150-foot wide TECO easement that's immediately adjacent to us. And this is the Causeway Boulevard. It's a pretty large boulevard at that location. Next, please. So our future land use, we have residential 9 with residential 20 to the west of us. Next, please. And this is the zoning. We are, a portion of it is the planned development, and to the north of us is RSC 6. Obviously, in connection with this, we are going to be applying for a minor change, minor modification to remove this portion of the site of the development out of the overall planned development. But as you can see all the way to the east of us, the majority is commercial and general uses, as well as some to the south, which is a bit hard to see. Next, please. So this is the zoning. It's 2 phases, and it's approved for a wide range of commercial uses. And the request is basically to maintain some of that. Next, please. So this is the first option. The first option is to retain the 5,000 square feet of retail use along Causeway Boulevard, and the remainder of the property would be for townhomes. Part of the request does need a flex of the residential 20 from the west in order to get the 52 townhomes. The main connection is going to be from 86th Street, which is already an approved access from the original planned development. We have all the required buffers and screening all around it. And we have also a second option. Next, please. The second option is for all townhomes, no flex requested, but it would be up to 60 townhome units for the site. Next, please. So part of this, although there's been commercial approved there for a very long time, as well as commercial all along this corridor, our site specifically does not meet the commercial location criteria, therefore requesting a waiver. But in discussion with staff and the documentation that are provided, considering the intensive development in the area, there's adequate public facilities as well as adequate roadway adjacent to the site. And it also meets the infill policy that at least 50% of the block is commercial, and this actually surpasses it. And so therefore, staff felt like they were able to recommend approval, supportable to waive this commercial location criteria requirements. Next, please. Part of it is a design exception for 86th Street. The county engineer has reviewed this and has reviewed the proposed exception design and found it, if we get zoning approval, that would be part of it, that they would approve the design exception. Next, please. And finally, the staff findings, Planning Commission reviewed the request. They found it consistent with the Greater Palm River Community Plan and the livable community element, as well as the future land use element. Development Services staff found the request approvable and compatible with the surrounding, subject to conditions of approval, and we had no objections from reviewing agencies. And I'm here if you have any questions.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
On the slide that you showed where you mentioned part of the property was being removed from the existing PD.
Correct.
And so what's a little confusing about that is when I read the staff report, it appears that the portion of the PD to the east, that other adjacent parcel, is being removed from the PD. Did you say part of this subject property is being removed from the PD or that one? Do you understand what I mean?
I do understand. So if you look at so this is the currently approved plan development, phase 1 and phase 2.
Okay.
Our area is phase 2. It's highlighted. And just to the north of there, sort of like the L shape, the forested area, that's part of our site too. Since we're creating a new plan development to include these two parcels, we do have to request PRS basically to remove phase 2 as part of the plan development. So therefore, the plan development's only going to remain with phase 1.
So phase 1, then that parcel will remain in the existing PD, 87-0083.
Correct.
That'll be its zoning.
Correct.
And then if this zoning is approved, phase 2 and the forested area north of there will be the new PD. Is that correct? Okay.
That's exactly right.
It's the staff report doesn't seem to reflect that same scenario, but
I think Brian concurs.
Okay.
That is the
That's
effect
how
of
it's
the change. And
that makes sense to me. Okay. That's the only question I had for you. Thank you. All right.
Hello, ready for Tim Lampkin, Development Services. A revised report was submitted to reflect the school board comments added to page 9 of the staff report. As the applicant stated, they're seeking to develop approximately 7.22 acre unified development consisting of 2 folios. Consequently, the applicant is requesting, as was just discussed, to expand the PD boundary north and concurrently remove folio 44660.0000 to the immediate east.
Yeah, that's the question I had, Mr. Lampkin. I don't think that's accurate.
Oh, I can look it up really quick if you bear with me.
I think the applicant just testified that folio 44660.0000 is going to remain in PD 87-0083. And the folio that's coming out is the folio that is a portion of this subject property application.
So no, I just looked it up. I have up the zoning information sheet. I looked up GIS. I looked up, hold on, 44660.000 is the phase that now has a garage on it. I could share my screen. That might be easier. We haven't done that for a bit, but let me do that really quickly. I can remember how to share the screen. Okay, here we go. Sorry, I think this will answer the question though. Okay, can everyone, so this is, and so right here, you'll see, I'm going to highlight to the left, 44660.0000. That's this one here. That's the one that's part of the PRS that's being pulled out. Then this is the parcel that's remaining in the new PD, and then the RSC 6, this parcel here. But so,
Madam Hearing Officer, I think it's just a matter of semantics. Again, Mr. Lampkin noted that, again, the parcel of the west and the other parcel of the north is going to be in a new PD. And the PRS is to basically recognize that area that's shaded is going to be the only area left in the PD. So I think it's just.
Okay.
Yeah.
I understand. But that's not what the staff report says.
Understood. And we can certainly clarify that, but
All right.
that's the intent and the effect of these changes.
Thank you.
Okay, hold on, let's see. I'm sorry, I'm looking at the staff report. But
Mr. Lampkin, just proceed with your presentation. We can clarify that later. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so option 1, they're proposing 2 possible development options. Option 1 is to allow 5,000 square foot of commercial general uses with restrictions and 52 townhomes. Option 2 is to develop the entire site with 60 townhome units. The site is located north of Causeway Boulevard and is located in the urban service area within the limits of the Greater Palm River Community Plan. The surrounding use is predominantly a mixture of residential and commercial uses. Surrounding uses along Causeway Boulevard include commercial, single-family residential, and multifamily residential. There's a church immediately north of the site and a mini warehouse to the northwest across South 86th Street. The PD is currently approved for minor vehicle repair shop, car sales, church, contractor's office, enclosed storage, professional office and services, and all uses permitted in the CG zoning district, with a maximum FAR of 0.25 or 28,925 square feet. The 4.85 acre parcel to the north is currently zoned RSC 6, which allows single-family residential development. The 2.09 parcel to the immediate east is required to be concurrently removed from the existing PD through the PRS process, and this will happen concurrently. If the PRS moves slower, then the rezone will move slower so they can both be heard at the board together. Immediately east of the proposed PD is folio number 44660.0000, which again is the 2.09 acre property that is part of the same PD that currently exists, 87-0083. Folio 44660.000 is currently developed with a vehicle repair shop. It is approved for retail space located in a 28,000 square foot structure and a 6,001 story retail space. And to the immediate north is property designated RSC 6, which is undeveloped and proposed to be incorporated into the new PD boundary. South across Causeway Boulevard, if a PD approved for up to 48 multifamily dwelling units, which is currently not developed, the applicant requests a waiver of the additional setback of 2 feet for every feet over 20 for option for the second option to allow the proposed 60 townhomes. The applicant is proposing a maximum 35-foot building height. Staff finds the waiver supportable. The applicant has not requested variation from the general site development requirements found in Part 6.06.06, buffering and screening standards. As South 86th Street is a substandard local roadway, the applicant's engineer of record submitted a design exception, which the applicant just went into detail, so I will not. She did a great job. The site will comply with and conform to all applicable policies and regulations, including but not limited to the Hillsborough County Land Development Code, site development and tech manuals. Based upon the above, including the existing development pattern, staff finds the request approvable. And that concludes my presentations, unless there are any questions.
No more questions for you other than that that we discussed earlier. All right, Planning Commission?
Carliana, Senior Planner with Planning Commission staff. The subject site is approximately 7.22 acres in the urban service area within the limits of the Greater Palm River Community Plan. The applicant is requesting to rezone 2 parcels from RSC 6 and PD to PD to allow for 2 potential development options. So again, option 1 is 52 townhomes, utilizing a flex of the residential 20 to the west and 5,000 square feet of commercial general uses, excluding restaurants with drive-up facilities. Option 2 is 60 townhomes. So the site has a future land use designation of residential 9 with typical uses such as residential, urban scale neighborhood, commercial, office uses, multi-purpose projects, and mixed-use development. Non-residential uses are subject to locational criteria. The subject site is surrounded by residential 9 to the north, east, and south. To the west is residential 20, and to the south and southeast are residential 20 and residential 9 future land use designations. Further southwest of the site is office commercial 20, and further north and east is community mixed use 12 and urban mixed use 20. Surrounding uses along Causeway Boulevard include some light and heavy commercial, single-family residential, multifamily residential. There is a church, single-family home immediately to the north of the site. To the northwest is a very large mini warehouse. To the west is a vacant commercial building. To the south is Causeway Boulevard, and further south of that is land owned by the Department of Transportation. To the east and northeast are single-family residential uses. The proposed development options are compatible and in scale with the character of the area, meeting the intent of Policy 1.4, which directs growth into the urban service area. Future land use element objective 16 and its associated policies discuss the need to protect existing neighborhoods and communities. The development pattern along this section of the causeway has a mix of uses, including light to heavy commercial, consistent with the scale of what is being proposed under option 1. The 2 proposed development options show site planning techniques such as buffering and screening that would mitigate for adverse impacts to the surrounding properties. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Okay, just checking. The applicant is proposing a flex per policy 7.3 and 7.4 to option 1. Staff finds that the flex request is consistent with the flex provisions. And with the flex, the property will have a maximum of 62 potential units. The applicant is only proposing 52. So the subject site does not meet locational criteria. The nearest qualifying intersection is Causeway Boulevard and 78th Street, and Causeway Boulevard and US Highway 301. Both intersections are approximately 3,000 to 3,300 feet away. The applicant has submitted a waiver request in accordance with Flu Policy 22.8 and has stated that the corridor tends to be non-residential uses with commercial zoning, and that the request is compatible with the surrounding development being in an urban service area, having adequate public facilities and adequate roadway. Planning Commission staff has reviewed the waiver request and recommends that the waiver is granted. The proposal meets the intent of the infill policy 25.3, which allows for infill when properties are in a block with more than 50% of the block face being either commercial zoning or with commercial uses. The proposed development option meets that intent of the Greater Palm River Community Plan as well. Both development options promote and provide opportunities for compatible, well-designed public use, residential, and business growth and jobs. Overall, staff finds that the proposed development options are compatible with the existing development pattern found within the surrounding area, and it supports the vision of the Greater Palm River Community Plan. Therefore, the proposed plan development would allow for a development that is consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the unincorporated Hillsborough County Comprehensive Plan. Based upon those considerations, Planning Commission staff finds the proposed plan development consistent with the unincorporated Hillsborough County Comprehensive Plan, subject to the conditions proposed by the Hillsborough County Development Services Department. I will be glad to answer any questions you may have.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, is there anyone here or online who wishes to speak in support of this application? Don't hear anyone. Is there anyone here or online who wishes to speak in opposition to this application? All right, don't hear anyone. Development services?
Nothing further.
All right, I just want to make sure we're going to get a...
We'll correct the report. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Applicant? Nothing further? Okay. So this will close the hearing on rezoning PD 22-0562.
The next item is agenda item D4, rezoning PD 22-1106. The applicant is Cami Corbett with Hilborn Henderson. The request is rezoned from AS1 to Plan Development. Tanya Chappello will provide staff recommendation after presentation by the applicant. Thank you.
Good evening, Cami Corbett with the law firm of Hill, Ward and Henderson, and I do have a presentation. Just bear with us. And I am listed as the applicant, but I filed this application on behalf of the Moffitt Cancer Center. Next slide. This is for a Moffitt Cancer Center outpatient facility, and this fulfills a critical need to expand the network into areas where patients live. We'll be providing expansion of access to life-saving screening and prevention, world-class care, and clinical trials. This will make cancer care and treatment more accessible. We'll be offering services such as medical oncology, radiation, pharmacy, lab services, screening, and diagnostics, and we expect to create about 150 jobs. Next slide. This is the subject property looking south. This is 674 College Avenue, and you can see in the backdrop the interchange for I-75. This is down in Ruskin. Next slide. This is a larger vicinity map, and you can see all of the single-family residential to the east and to the north. We have a lot of patients that we see in this area, and we're proud to be bringing something closer to home to allow them to seek treatments closer to home. Next slide. This is a future land use map. SMU6 is a future land use of the property, and you can see it's surrounded by SMU6. There's some UMU20 to the east and R4 to the south. The right-hand slide is the current zoning. The yellow boxes represent properties that are zoned commercial by Euclidean Commercial Zoning District, CN, CG, CI, M, and CN. And that box that's highlighted in orange is zoned ASC1, but it's an existing legal non-conforming automobile repair and sales center. Next slide. And then also you can see the industrial storage directly to the east. This is the proposed site plan. We're proposing 98,300 square feet of medical office with a maximum height of 3 stories. We have standard buffering screening with one exception. We are asking to a variation to the VUA buffer from 6 feet to 0 feet on the eastern boundary. That's typically there's a 0 buffer and screening required between those two uses, but there's a sort of a conflict with the vehicle use area requires 6 feet when adjacent to property. So that's what we're asking for the variation for. We are also asking for a proposed parking variation to allow 4.59 spaces per 1,000. And this is based on the standards in the current ITE parking manual. And at this time, I'd like to ask Steve Henry to come up and briefly touch on that, and then also talk about the roadway improvements that will be required.
Good evening. Steve Henry, Links & Associates, 5023 West Laurel, Tampa 33607. One is on the parking. We did use the ITE 5th edition trip parking generation manual. It actually has over 100 studies that have been done for office buildings that are based on that rate. So from that standpoint, we think it's appropriate to use that as the variation. And then as far as the improvements, we did submit a design exception. 27th Street is a substandard road. We submitted a design exception and it has been deemed approvable by the county engineer. Yes. Right, and this shows the improvements that we're doing. This is 27th. So essentially what we're doing is 3-laning 27th from College Avenue down to our project access. And it'll include both adding a southbound left turn lane into our project and then providing 3 lanes for the northbound, two northbound lanes and then 1 southbound. And then this provides the section that we're going to be building. So essentially what we're going to be doing is putting curb and gutter on the east side of the road, widening it to 11-foot lanes to meet the code, and then providing a 10-foot sidewalk on the east side of the road. That concludes my presentation, unless you've got any questions.
Parking, is there you might have mentioned this, is there a PD variation requested for the parking spaces? Did you cover that, Ms.? Okay.
Yes, you covered it, yes.
Okay. That's all the questions I have for you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Cami Corbett again for the record. Yes, basically the justification for the variation is that ITE trip generation manual is more up to date and current than the code standards that have been in the code forever. And so that was essentially what was justified in the narrative as far as the PD variation for the parking.
So just to clarify, there's 2 PD variations, one for the buffer and one for the number of parking spaces, 3 admin variances and a design exception. Is that correct? Okay, got it. Okay.
To keep track of those.
Yeah.
Yeah, just my last slide, just summarizing that we have been found consistent with the comprehensive plan and compatible with the surrounding area by both the Planning Commission and Development Services. I do have a number of letters of support that I'd like to submit into the record. One is from Congressman Buchanan, and then we have 12 from other residents in the Hillsborough County, and probably about half of those are in the Riverview, Waimama area.
All right, put those in the record. Thank you. All right, Development Services.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good evening, Tanya Chapela, Development Services. This application is for PD 22-1106. The existing zoning is agricultural single family 1, which permits agricultural uses. And the proposed zoning is for a planned development to allow medical offices and ancillary uses. They're requesting for 98,300 square feet. They're also requiring a variance to the Land Development Code, Section 60604, off-street vehicular use areas to remove the 6 feet perimeter buffer requirement along the eastern property boundary. And the applicant already explained the parking requirement variation that they're requesting.
Ms. Chapela, can I ask you just quickly on that topic? I think that's why I was confused about that, because I didn't see that in the staff report or the revised staff report that that's a PD variation. On to 60502, the parking spaces?
Well, in my experience, that comes in the transportation report, but I can revise the report to include it to my report. I can do that.
Okay, thank you.
So the parcel is located along College Avenue East, developed with commercial zoning. The residential zone area to the south is developed with a church building. And to the east is a property zone PD 850113 that contains a mini warehouse development. So the proposed uses are comparable to the commercial uses in the surrounding development. The proposed 0.27 FAR is under the maximum 0.36 FAR allowable in the SMU6 comprehensive plan category. Given the above, staff finds the proposed modification is compatible with the surrounding properties and is keeping the general development pattern of the area. This concludes my presentation. I'm available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chapella.
Madam Hearing Officer, just to further clarify, what Tanya was speaking to is that parking variation, the transportation staff reviews for compliance with the variation criteria, but you're correct, the report should still reflect that that was a variation. So again, we'll update the report to make sure that's included and addressed in the report.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Grady. All right, Planning Commission.
Carliano, Senior Planner with Planning Commission staff. The property is 8.7 acres located on the south side of South College Avenue on the east side of 27th Street Southeast. The subject site is located within the urban service area and within the limits of the Ruskin Community Plan and the South Shore area-wide systems. The applicant is requesting rezoning from agricultural single-family 1 to planned development to permit the development of a 3-story, 98,300 square foot medical office. The subject site's future land use classification is suburban mixed-use 6. Typical uses include residential, suburban scale neighborhood commercial, office uses, research, corporate park uses, light industrial multipurpose, and clustered residential development or mixed-use projects. Neighborhood commercial uses are subject to locational criteria and office uses are not. The proposed use is considered an office use and therefore it's not subject to the locational criteria. SMU6 surrounds the subject site on all the sides. To the east is a self-storage building and a single-family residential is located to the immediate south. Light commercial uses are located north of the site along College Avenue, interspersed with light industrial uses. Across College Avenue to the north are light commercial uses and agricultural uses. The request is consistent with Objective 1 and 9 and its accompanying policies. The subject site is proposing a 3-story medical office within the urban service area and is compatible with the scale of the existing development in the area. Staff has reviewed the site plan received by Development Services on September 1st of 2022 and finds the development will have type B buffers on the southern sides, an 8-foot landscape buffer along College Avenue. The existing eastern and walls will be retained. The northern portion of the site will be developed with parking and underground stormwater storage. The applicant has clarified that the site will not include urgent care emergency medical and that the hours of operations will be limited from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. The applicant has requested an alternative parking request for 459 spaces and a design exception regarding the access from College Avenue. Staff has no objection to the design exception or the parking request. The proposed rezoning meets the intent of the neighborhood protection policies. The property is within proximity of light commercial uses and light industrial uses along College Avenue. A medical office clinic provides an appropriate transition of uses. The request is consistent with Goal 12 of the community design component as the scale of the development is compatible to the adjacent residential areas. The subject site is in Area 3 of the Ruskin Community Plan and within the South Shore area-wide systems as previously mentioned. The proposed development is consistent with the economic goal of the community plan and it's developing a use that provides for additional employment opportunities. Goal 7 of the Ruskin Community Plan directs commercial, office, and residential uses from the intersection of 21st Street and College Avenue to the eastern boundary of the community plan area. The proposed medical office is located in that preferred area and it furthers the vision of the community plan. At the time of filing of the staff report on October 5th, 2022, transportation and zoning comments were not yet available in optics. They weren't taken into consideration. However, even with that provided, staff's recommendation is not going to change. Overall, the proposed plan development would allow for a development that is consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the future of Hillsborough County Comprehensive Plan and is compatible with the existing plan development pattern found within the area. Based on those considerations, Planning Commission staff finds the proposed plan development consistent with the unincorporated Hillsborough County Comprehensive Plan, subject to the conditions by Development Services Department. I will gladly answer any questions.
All right, thank you. I have no questions for you. All right, is there anyone here or online who wishes to speak in support of this application? Do not hear anyone. Is there anyone here or online who wishes to speak in opposition to this application? All right, do not hear anyone. Development services, anything further?
Nothing further.
Okay, and applicant, anything further?
Cami Corbett again. I just want to clarify the PD variation. We're asking for 4.9 spaces per 1,000. I'm not sure if I think there was some reference to 449 or 459 parking spaces.
I think it's 4.59.
4.59, sorry. Yeah.
And then I think transportation wanted 25 bicycle park.
Yes, we're fine with the conditions that are in the report. We had a lot of time to review the transportation comments on this one, and we're fine with them. So
Okay. I understand. Thank you. All right, this will close the hearing then on rezoning PD 22-1106, and that will conclude the zoning hearing master meeting this evening.